All right, everybody, welcome to the Modern Horizons Live Q&A for the Pauper Cube. Uh, y'all voted for Friday night, and there's not many of you here. That's okay. I think some of the loudest people are here, which matters more, right? And silence. Wow. Volume over veracity. That is exactly how arguing on the internet works. So we have a pretty light agenda today. We're going to talk about Modern Horizons cards because there's a lot of them, and I want to try to move quick and talk about some of the proposed changes that I'm thinking about and why I'm thinking about them, and get some challenge and definitely tweak that. I don't think there's a final one set in stone yet. The set's bonkers, as we all know. So want to try to move quickly and hit as many relevant cards, but focus on kind of what makes the most sense. And there's going to be two pieces to that. One is what should we change and update in the cube, and I've got some thoughts about that. Just some upgrades and swaps. And then, do we want to expand the cube? Because the card quality is so high, I think that this is a great opportunity to help just add a little bit more variety to the cube. And when it doesn't come at the expense of power, I think it's most appropriate to do that. So get your the cube gets bigger bets going, because it's probably going to go. Want to touch a little bit about how I'm going to try to tackle rewards and try to make it effective and efficient for everyone. It's a special set that seems to come with special price points. So a little bit to touch on there, kind of the strategy and what I'm going to look to do, and then ultimately kind of a last call. So you can all yell at me about the stuff that we didn't yell enough about. If that makes sense to everybody.
Sounds good to me.
Good for me.
Awesome. Yelling. Yeah, you get it. So I want to run down the cards that in my first pass. This includes the PTR, so the PTR and the Modern Horizons broader card discussion kind of run together. I can't really do one without the other. There's just way too many cards. So I want to talk about the cards that I really like, why I like them, and kind of why I'm looking at getting them in the cube. And this kind of matches up to the teaser that I shared earlier. Now I removed the link to that. The link's still there, but if you click on it, it's not going to show you anything, because now I need to set my costs in and try to make sure that I try to, order everything and not break the break the Patron bank here. But the goal that I have is really hitting on these awesome cards and trying to be very concise about why I think that they belong in the cube. And we're going to go in Wooburg order with colorless, and then I'm going to hit some additional cards that have kind of come up in discussion, or I want to hit later, and that'll go into kind of adding on other Modern Horizons cards. So a little bit out of order, but mostly in kind of the order that I'm looking at adding them. The first is Ephemerate. Yeah, do it, Ephemerate. And if somebody wants to... oh wow, Scryfold must be down. Oh, there it is. If somebody wants to be super duper and type in the cards when I talk about them, that would be awesome, because that would save me a little bit of time. But we've done. I had cloud shift in a long time ago. I wish Flicker was a common. I would have had that in an early version of the cube. The biggest difference is Ephemerate is just on a whole nother power level, right? Like cloud shift, you do it once, it's a cool trick. Maybe it's a counterspell to removal. Maybe it's just a value play. Ephemerate lets you get both ways. If somebody's going to nuke your enters the battlefield creature, something like, I don't know, let's say we add Pondering Mage, feels pretty good to do it not once, but two more times. I think in terms of, giving blue-white a little bit more of an identity, I think with Momentary Blink and some of the other effects that are in those colors that I can look to add over the next couple updates, we can give that a better identity than just blue-white skies, right? You're still going to have that, still a great draft archetype, but I think a little bit more flickering is going to be delightful. And it's definitely in the blue-white wheelhouse. Also feels good, pretty good in white-black. Feels pretty good in probably white-green, honestly. There's a lot of things that you can flicker, and Ephemerate is just stupid good.
Out of the current list, it looks like a little shy of half of the creatures have entered the battlefield effect, so I think this is probably fine. It would be nice to sort of get a little more support for it, but yeah, Flicker's good.
Yeah, we'll do it in waves. I really don't have room to dump like 40 cards in this update. But yeah, the blue white flickering is something that I'm looking at a lot more, and I've got a less defensible card. I think we'll have a better discussion about to touch on too. The next card in white is Martyr Soul, and I think that this is pretty much a slam dunk. If you're curving out one drop into two drops, you get a 5/4 for free, basically. I can't, at worst you get something great on curve as a 3/2. Like that's reasonable. It's a defensible size. It blocks and trades really well. It's going to pretty much take out almost anything that comes down for 3 mana that I can hit. I really don't see a reason not to add it. I think it's just a really strong card, and the upside potential is really easy to hit. There's just tons of token making, so let's not spend any more time on that unless somebody thinks that we've all misread this card. A card that I missed in the first pass. I don't think I talked about it in my quick hits because I misread it. Rock's Veteran. So Rock's Veteran is a 4-drop, and it's a 2/4, which is not the most exciting size. I'll be honest. 2/4 is okay. We used to have Palace Sentinels, which was the make yourself the Monarch card. And that was a 2/4, and it was never very good in combat. It blocked okay, but there's so much evasion, so many flyers, so many removal spells. A 2/4 is really not going to hold the fort forever on its own, especially on turn 4. If it was turn 3 or turn 2, suddenly that 3 toughness, 4 toughness matters a lot more. But in missing this, I'm pretty sure at least 5 people in the Discord pointed out that it taps a creature when it attacks, and so it's actually a combination of like a falter effect meets a token leading battle cry meets something that's really hard to block. You probably have to double block it to get it to kill it off, and it's taking out probably the best thing to block with it. So in terms of giving white ways to push damage through, or a white-red deck, something that is a little bit closer to the top end, I consider 4 and 5 drops the top end for an aggressive deck. Yeah, this plus Battle Screech, it's just very easy to kind of push in with this card, and I think that the Battle Cry is that pseudo pump effect that you get some flyers going, or you get 4 tokens in play and just smash in. They got to trade away a bunch of creatures. They don't get to block with their best blocker, and they probably don't kill this in combat anyway without a double block or some other trick. So I think that this is a nice solid crunchy add. 4 toughness is the sweet spot. Yeah, there's so many burn spells that deal 3 damage, so many things that give -2/-2. 4 toughness is really nice. It lets it hold up well. Speaking of things that don't have a lot of toughness, Reprobation. It's it's Caspina's Transmutation. Like, we just added this card in blue. I think that there's easily a more expensive white removal spell that we can get rid of. One of the maybe one of the permanent locking down effects, or one of the the exile effects at like 4 mana. I think there's at least 3 removal spells in white at 4 mana that we can just upgrade one of them pretty straightforwardly. It doesn't keep it out of combat. It's not perfect. It's not going to let you play it and then kill your opponent if you only need to like attack with 1 creature and get through, and they only have 1 creature. But it is a great way to remove abilities from some of the few annoying creatures that have them.
It's definitely worse than Casmina's because of the color it's in, but it's still really.
Yeah, like obviously a mono blue deck is very excited for the Transmutation, but I think that the fact that this has the arrest effect and it's not just a shrink it down. There was a card that was downshifted, I think in Eternal Masters. It was a Saga uncommon, Humble. Right? It was like an instant, made something an 0/1 until end of turn and loses all abilities. This is just a permanent version of that, which is much stronger. And Humble didn't stay in the cube, but I think that the fact that this is an enchantment, you can find it with our favorite Heart Beast Guide friend, and it removes the ability from a creature. It's one of the few ways that you can kind of answer a pinger or an erratic visionary or something like that. And I think that those counters are important to have at least floating around somewhere. White doesn't get to kill it, but at least it can like strip the ability away, which can be more relevant. The next card, and this one I know Omni is going to have some feeling about. Settle Beyond Reality. So this one is a little less defensible, but I really like it because it's secretly a 2-for-1 or a 3-for-1 like almost every time you play it. It's not an instant, so it's a lot of commitment on your turn. But the fact that it's not choose one but choose both, you get to kill something permanently, and you get to flicker one of your own creatures. It's cute with Mnemonic Wall, yes, but we're not going to play the 2-card combo Dream in a cube where there's only one copy of each card. But if you exile your opponent's best creature, you mana war and rebalance their next best creature, you've just fought 4 turns. I don't know. It feels like it would play out much better in kind of the creature heavy, enters the battlefield heavy cube that we have. But 5 mana sorcery is a massive commitment. On the other hand, we have some stuff at the top end in white that we really don't see play, and I'm just not sure. I would like to see it in. I think it's fun enough to try out. But on the other hand, I don't think it ends games. I think Decontest asks the best question, which is, does this end the game? And I don't think it does. It's randomly good value every time you play it. I don't know if that's good enough, but I think it's a lot of fun, and I think people would appreciate getting a wink nudge towards playing more flicker stuff, because at the top end of the flicker deck, you've maybe got a 5-drop flyer, you've got a 4-drop. This is a nice little kind of way to put something on the top end of that deck if you don't get your Chivalrous Chevalier to wheel.
I think you kind of already addressed most of the issues I have with this. Like, 5 mana is a lot for this effect. Comparing this to like Cloud Shift, you're basically paying 4 mana for a piece of removal and docking yourself to sorcery speed. But I guess my big thing is what Vagabants just asked. Like, what do you think is worse than this that can get cut?
The card I have penciled in. So, for example, Rock's Veteran, I penciled in Paladin of the Bloodstained as a replacement for Reprobation, Isolation Zone. Again, I think stronger cards for a similar effect. The big one that I see for Settle Beyond Reality is Sheer Drop. I always imagined that as a kind of a 6-drop, kill a creature, make a 3/3, kind of a nice 2-for-1 body, kind of a white flavor of, Predatory Night Stalker. But everybody just plays it as a sorcery speed 3-mana removal spell. Here, you get, for 2 more mana, you just exile a thing. It doesn't have to be tapped, and you get value on top of it. And it's cheaper than if you were doing the Awaken mode. So in that context, that's kind of where I was going, is that it's just strictly more powerful than that card, I believe. But, it also, I could just swap Sheer Drop for something else, like Ephemerate. Like, there's no reason, like, there's plenty of other removal. It's not like I have to do that, but that was what came to mind when thinking about Settle Beyond Reality and kind of adding that level of fun. Any follow-up thoughts to that, or, Are we going into UW Flickers and Archetype? I believe I'm going to start making the shift. It's going to take a couple updates and maybe a clutch reprint or two over the next year, I think, to make it easy to switch into. But there's a ton of Enter the Battlefield stuff in both of those colors, and the payoff's pretty good. Momentary Blink is kind of a nice multicolor card. Yeah, Ghostly Flicker. I actually like the creature only version because it can target up to 1 or up to 2 creatures, so you're not locked out of casting it. Ghostly Flicker does require 2 targets. Yeah, so I kind of like Displace a little bit more because it focuses on creatures, and you're not trying to do weird shenanigans with lands and stuff like that. But there's no reason either or both cards couldn't make it in. But that's kind of a down the road kind of thought. Revisiting blue white is kind of on my radar. So if we want to talk about Settle Beyond Reality anymore, we can start talking about blue cards. Y'all seen Fairy Seer? Is that a card?
A very good card.
It's a very good card. It is. I'm pretty sure Augur of Bolas will not be missed. We've hashed the math on that many times, and I think blue losing one of its nice 2-drop blockers for a steady, consistent, just start fixing your deck. Draw what you need. Scry to the land or scry to a relevant 2-drop or 3-drop that you need to set up with. There's plenty of ways to slow down the opponent with bounce spells and mana war effects. So I don't think losing Augur Bolas is going to be lost that much. But Fairy Seer is pretty straightforward. Yeah, and you can go aggro. Give it Bone Splitter. Make your own Delver. This is a Voltron Delver. Go for it. The next card I want to talk about is Moonblade Shinobi. And this one I'm actually starting to waffle back on. I originally had it penciled in to replace Stitch Drake, but Moonblade Shinobi, the more I think about it, it's basically a one-time effect, right? Like, unless you're just in a dominant position and you manage to keep the opponent from having any blocker whatsoever, you get to make a 1/1/1 flyer. You've got to recycle a creature, some other untapped, unblocked attacker. You've got to recycle something and replay it. And you're probably not curving out with it on turn 3 in most blue decks. Certainly not a blue heavy deck. You're probably more of a blue white deck or something else. There's already the draw card ninja. I'm forgetting the name of it, which is pretty solid, but it's also just like a one shot, right? Like, you bounce a creature, ninja the depowers. You bounce a creature, hit for 2, draw a card, and that's it. The opponent will never let you hit with that creature again if they can help it, just because they know what getting buried in cards means. So this is a little more expensive, hits just a little bit more, and makes a 1/1 flyer. On the flip side, if you start bouncing it, if you start making some flyers, it adds up really quick and kind of snowballs. But I'm just not seeing the power of this card actually being as high as when I originally reviewed it. I think that's all I have to say about that. I don't know if there's any Moonblade Shinobi champions that want to kind of double down on that, but I think it was the ninja fan in me getting starry-eyed for a minute.
It helps power out other ninjas because it makes flyers, but we don't have many other ninjas, so
yeah, there's no real unblocking synergy. And blue is blue white has plenty of other ways to have efficient flyers. Like, for 2 mana you're getting 2 3s. You don't need a lot of it. So let's talk about a blue card that is pretty good. Pondering Mage. Pondering Mage was a card. I've heard a lot of feedback about Gryff Vanguard. Gryff Vanguard, why is this card here? Why are we still playing with this card? Because 3/2 flying draw card is just not good enough rate anymore for 5 mana, I guess. And Pondering Mage kind of fits a very nice spot for blue. It doesn't fly, but blue's not hurting for flyers. There's a ton of other ways to fly. It's not like blue needs a 5 mana finisher. But the 4 toughness is critical. It blocks a lot of dumb things. All the 3/3s, the 3/3 elephants that are in green, the 3/3s and the 3/2s that are all over red. It can stand up to a little bit of pressure, and you get card selection on top of it. Also, it's entering the battlefield effect, so it plays out very similarly if you flicker it, if you bounce it, replay it. It does all the same stuff that Griff Vanguard would to an extent, but you just get the benefit of having a 3/4 body. It's not evasive, but I think the blue decks that want a Dirtle will like it more. Yes, it's Vagabants. It's after checking, because it's Ponder. So OG Ponder is you look at the top 3 and you can set it, or then shuffle, then draw. So if you look at the top 3 and you don't see what you need, you can randomly maybe mize it off of a 4th card. Yeah, set it or forget it. A little bit of a reverse Ronco kind of thing. It's a deep cut. Portent for the hipsters, legacy nerds. Nobody should be playing Portent. Go away. Except in Commander. Can we have Ponder too? So the reason I cut Ponder is for the same reason Brainstorm's not in. So this is a good discussion point. So I used to have Brainstorm, and Brainstorm's iconic legacy power, the whole format's defined by it. They'll never remove Brainstorm from Legacy, right? Like, this is the big thing. But there's so few shuffle effects that setting it, is a little bit off, and shuffling and getting a random card at sorcery speed is also not very exciting. You'd rather keep your mana up for something else. And it's also a shuffle, which slows down the game. So I used to have Ponder. I actually have a signed M10 Ponder in foil, the one where this Pondering Mage is actually echoing the art. It's the one that you see here in the Ponder that Scryfall linked. So it's beautiful and I love it, but I cut it in Brainstorm because they just don't perform. As it turns out, in Limited, from a geometric distribution standpoint, I wrote an article, I don't know, years ago now when I talked about this. It's the reason Preordain is like super banned in Modern is because if you're going second and you have Preordain in hand, you begin your turn, you draw a card, you see one card, you play Island, play Preordain, you look at 2 more. If neither of those cards are cards you need, you put them on the bottom and then draw an actual 4th unique card. It lets you see so much of your library just on the first turn. And it's super subtle, but Scry works so much better in Limited and Singleton formats than when you have multiples, because often you just need to find the one copy of the card you have. The ability to filter to the card that you want is much more effective versus like, say, Ponder. You look at the top 3. If you don't want any of those cards, you shuffle and you have no additional information about what's coming from your deck. It's just you just drew a card at random, basically. It's not actually giving you an advantage in terms of any card advantage, any information advantage. So that's why I've really leaned into the Scry effects, and why when I looked at the 5-drops to bring in Pondering Mage for, instead of the Dominaria Misty guy. Let me find that. Watcher and Mist. It costs the same. It's the same toughness. You get the benefit of flying, but here I actually think Watcher in the Mist is better than Pondering Mage. You get to just look at 2 cards, get rid of them, or leave it on top, and you have a 3/4 flyer, and it's all for the same mana cost. Pondering Mage puts a card in your hand and gets you a shuffle if you really, really want it. But it's basically the same net plus a card from Wretched Griff, but you get a little bit more information to decide what to do with first. And so incrementally, that's kind of how I ranked those 3 cards. If it, instead of Pondering Mage, it was Preordained Mage, this would not be a discussion at all. Like, it would just be way better. And I really wish they would make a Preordained Mage rather than a Pondering Mage. Multiple people are typing. He's in my Brago EDH deck. Riverwise Augur is? Just brainstorm Merfolk. I love it. Pondering Mage is good. It is good. It's unlike when you just get Ponder. you're getting a body that's relevant too, right? And that's the major difference. Is at the end of the day, we're still looking to attack players and beat them down, and Pondering Mage lets you do that plus get some card selection.
I think part of the reason, to address an earlier point, that Griff Vanguard doesn't get a lot of love is the fact that it's literally right next to Muldrifter in that same slot and just looks miles worse in comparison.
Muldrifter is wrong. Muldrifter should never have been printed. It is the stupidest blue creature at common I think they've ever printed. It's dumber than Delver of Secrets. It's dumber than... I can't think of another dumb blue creature. Muldrifter is just dumb. It is so good, and it's not fair. So, it's like comparing every burn spell they print to Lightning Bolt. Like, yes, they'll get close, or they'll do little wrinkles to it, and they've figured out, as it turns out, Lightning Bolt is much easier to get close to than Muldrifter. Pondering Mage was the common creature they printed that draws you a card in the set designed for Modern, full of powerful commons. So that tells you how highly they think Muldrifter ranks in terms of power level compared to what they're willing to print in the set designed to be printed just to Modern. I'll leave it at that. Let's talk about more fun cards. How about Reign of Revelation? This seems like an easy one. It's instant speed Sift. Just boom, draw 3 cards and then discard 1. There's been a couple different flavors of the draw 3, discard 1. Some conditional ones where it's like discard 2 discard 2 cards unless you control an artifact card. I think it's some Tezzeret flavor of it. There's, I think trying to think of the name of another card, but they've all been sorcery speed. I did a look and I said, okay, what are all the instant speed draw 3 cards at common? And basically, Reign of Revelation is I think the only one at 3 mana. This isn't quite the comparison to there's one at 3 mana that's a sorcery that's really good. Compulsive Research. Well, Factor Fiction, yeah, if Factor Fiction was common, we would just be talking about Factor Fiction instead. But Factor Fiction's uncommon because that's really good too. But Compulsive Research also draws 3. It's a sorcery for 3 mana. I think adding on one mana and making it an instant and making it unconditional, you can discard any card, I think is exactly the kind of blue card that is good. So Hieroglyphic Illumination is... I like it because you can play it on turn 1. It's quietly, that's why Op's in there, it's why Preordain's in there. It's actually one of the quote-unquote blue 1-drops that you can run. And that's what makes that card really good, because otherwise it's just, there's a couple other flavors of instant speed draw 2 for 4 mana that we could have been playing. You can always just cycle it for 1 blue mana that kind of put it over the top. And it took me a long time to see that. And I saw it, just as Modern was figuring it out too. So if you play blue, white, and Modern, you understand how that card's modes really work in mana efficient favor. I don't have anything penciled for replacing Reign of Revelation. I think I can just add it to the cube. I think blue could use a couple card selection spells, and this one plus the next one that I want to talk about are at the top of that list to just add to the cube. So the other obvious card I want to talk about is Scour All Possibilities, which is, Preordain, but you cost a little bit more and you get a flashback mode. Vagabants. I'm thinking about making the cube bigger just because the card quality is so high. This is one of the rare opportunities that it's easy and appropriate to add cards to the cube when they're not going to diminish or dilute the power. Which is something that I do want to be mindful of. We can kind of throw the powerful cards in as extras, replace some of the obvious and things that we can otherwise need to replace, and end up with a larger cube that's been tuned and is more powerful. Scour All Possibilities is just awesome. Like I have a hard time imagining blue decks that, especially dirtily decks or decks that are looking for ways to get an advantage. If you can, you get to Preordain twice. It's obviously not Preordain. but the flashback matters a lot. It's like the deep analysis kind of card. Like deep analysis, on its front mode is just okay, but the fact that you can discard this to some other effect if you really need to, or Blightning, and still get value back later on. It gives you a mana sink later in the game. Hey, you're top decking. Oh, you got a land. Well, great. Now you can just flash this back and dig 3 cards deeper if you need to, which again matters when you're looking to grind an opponent out. And if you don't need it, if you need to be faster, you just don't play it. Right? Yeah, decontest. Kind of lays it out good. If you don't need a card, that's what your sideboard's for. So bring in something else or play something that's gonna be more proactive. Like a 5-drop that bounces something. That would be probably a little bit stronger against an aggressive deck. Just buying time, killing tokens with a bounce effect. That's the kind of stuff that you want to do. But for slower decks or decks that want some card advantage, this is great. Very excited to die shortly after I greedily flash this back. Yes, I will kill you every time you try to flash this back. I'm going to punish. Tap out for that. Go for it. Let's talk about some black cards. Here's an easy one. Putrid Goblin. Are you familiar with Butcher Ghoul? Because it's basically Butcher Ghoul in reverse. You get a 2/2 and then it becomes a 1/1. I don't think I need to say anything more. For the Aristocrats decks, for sacrifice effects, this is exactly the kind of card you want to play. It's also just stupid good rate. Like back in the day, Scathe Zombies was Grey Ogre, and that was the rate that black creatures got. Now it gets a 2-drop bear that has an upside ability. So that's nice for common, right? There's the White Greek one. Yeah, Safehold Elite, I think. Man, I used to have it in the cube way back in the day. Yeah, Safehold Elite. Look at that. I have good memory. That is on my short list of cards and effects to go back to. If I'm going to support Aristocrats type effects and kind of white green, or not white green, but black green, black white, sacrificing creatures and getting power. It might be an easy swap for something like Travel Preparations. We're not really doing too much with +1/+1 counters, and there aren't that many -1/-1 counters to negate. But there are when you have Safehold Elite and Putrid Goblin and stuff. So it's one of those things where Safehold Elite probably should come in, and it's on my list to look at when we do another multicolor pass. We just kind of went through all of that, and I want to make sure that I'm not kind of overdoing it. Just changing things because I think it should be changed. I want to get a little more feedback because I'm not sure the Aristocrats, the Aristocrats deck is working out as powerful as it could be. So it might need to change elsewhere too. Do counters counter each other? Yes. So when they brought back Infect, they changed the rules to basically say, hey, if a creature sees a -1/-1 counter and a +1/+1 counter on it, they just kind of obliviate. They just knock each other out. So basically, how it used to be is you would have like 10 +1/+1 counters and 5 -1/-1 counters on the same creature. You'd have 15 counters on it, and you'd have to do the math. Now they just made it so you just clean it up as you go. The asymmetric counters don't, because we don't talk about those, because that's homelands, and nobody talks about homelands anymore. So we're talking about counters. Let's talk about Silumgar Scavenger. So Silumgar Scavenger is, flying exploit. It's a payoff for for sacrificing creatures elsewhere. You can't just sacrifice stuff to it except for the first time you play it. So you could have like a 3/4 haste flyer, which is too bad, if you exploit with it. But this is one of those cards where it's a good removal magnet, right? If you play this and you've got 3 other tokens out and a Phyrexian Ghoul, it doesn't, it's kind of like a hissing iguana in black, right? It doesn't really matter how your opponent tries to block or what they try to do. You're gonna be able to get a benefit from your creatures dying. I don't know. I remember there's a pack one pick one in the Discord a couple days ago, and Hissing Iguanar was in there, and nobody talked about it. And I let the whole discussion go, and I didn't jump in, but I really wanted to add, like, y'all haven't played enough with the Hissing Iguanar, and it shows. Because anything that cares when other creatures die, this is just your creatures, but more broadly, if you're tracking when other creatures die, it adds up really fast in a cube. Like I put opponents in no-win situations because they're at like 6 life, which seems like actually quite a bit, when you're against a token deck and you're trying to stabilize. But I just play, 3 more tokens and I've got a Hissing Iguanar. I attack into you, whether you block or not, I'm dealing you damage. And if you don't block, it just makes the clock tick down even faster. So I like these kind of effects that end the game, and I think this is the kind of payoff that helps give black sacrifice decks an identity, right? Like where you play some small creatures, some Persisty, or some Doom Deserter kind of cards. Then you've got your sacrifice outlet. You get down, and then you have a Cylinder Scavenger enter the battlefield, and suddenly just the combat math and the ability for you to beat your opponent up with their own removal spells adds up quick. And if they don't kill the Scavenger, it's going to get out of hand as the game goes on. Like, Cathari Bomber is, black-red, like, it's excellent. Like, you're gonna hit, you're gonna sacrifice it, Scavenger gets bigger, you make two goblins on the way in, you make 2 goblins on the way out, those goblins are gonna die to something. It's gonna snowball very quickly in the cube, and I expect this to turn out to be one of those sleeper picks where it'll go pretty late the first couple times, but people will start to figure out how powerful it is, or with the other cards that are around. And it also stands on its own. I think that's really important. Is trading in a 1/1 for a 3/4 flying haste is not too bad for black, and I think that's totally reasonable rate given its other abilities. So First Sphere Gargantua. It was my favorite moment when somebody screenshot the where I said this is that Tidebearer giant was as close as we would get to Phyrexian Gargantuan at common, and then in the very next set that they release, we get a Gargantua. So I had a lot of fun seeing that. I think one of the things that could give black a better identity is actively moving away from making it feel aggressive. There's great things that are good in black to be aggressive with, and I think black-red is still a breakneck pair, but red is always going to be the base of that deck, right? Red has way better 1-drops and 2-drops than black does. The haste matters, the burn spells matter, black removal spells matter. But I think giving black more of those control kind of toppers, where if you're in blue-black and you play this, on turn 6, like, hey, you draw a card, you have a 5/4 to beat down with, and if they kill it, you get to pay 3 mana, hit them again anyway, and still draw another card. It's kind of inertia effect that I think works really well for those control decks that need something at the top end. And I like being able to have two of these Gargantua effects in a cube, right, in a draft. It would be almost impossible for the randomization to have both Tidebearer Giant and First Sphere Gargantua missing from a draft, and so I think it's really nice that basically we went from having 0 of that kind of effect at common to now 2 that feels right. I like binning this and having a lot of axe that draws you a card. Yeah, and even if they block it, there's virtually nothing at 6 toughness and above. So whatever they block with, they're probably losing it unless it's Guardian of the Guild Pact, which nothing really kills Guardian of the Guild Pact in black. So good luck. But yeah, the fact that it comes back on its own, you don't need to do extra work, you don't need another reanimation effect, you just get to do it again. For 3 mana is efficient enough that you can draw into something and even play that or play a removal spell and then hit in for 5, turning an extra, say, Defile, which we'll talk about in a minute, into 5 damage, is pretty nice. And speaking of Defile, I kind of warmed up to the card more and more that I think about it. It's really easy to make it as efficient as the other 1 mana black removal spell that's an instant. I'm really not great with the names tonight, am I?
Disfigure.
Yeah, Disfigure. So it's really close to Disfigure, but obviously it scales up a little bit better as the game goes on. Drawing Disfigure on turn 7 is very different than drawing Defile on turn 7. And they said they keep my CV in Defile. What do you mean? Oh, aha. Sorry. Thanks for the bad word pun. Defile. But I think Defile's value goes up as the game goes on, while Disfigures goes down. And I think that again, it's one of those subtle shifts where if you're drafting a black deck, right, you might look at the two cards in the same pack and go, well, I know what I get Disfigure, I don't know what I get for Defile. But the upper end on Defile is just easily much better than Disfigure. That if you're playing a longer game deck, the correct pick is going to be Defile or Disfigure every time. And I think that's just an easy win for the cube. As a reminder, I was looking at just adding Putrid Goblin and Defile because they're so similar and basically duplicative of good effects in the cube already. Vulturous even was kind of meant to be a payoff for sacrifice decks, like hey, I'm going to sacrifice this and draw 2 cards or something. But I think Silumgar Scavenger is just a better payoff. And for the Gargantua, I was looking at replacing Grey Merchant of Asphodel, which is I think a fun card and a fine card, but it's also just one of those cards where it does its thing and it's just always okay. A 2/4 for 5 mana is interesting, but it also encourages you to try to play every black card, and that's not necessarily the goal of the cube, right? Like, let's not try to indicate that monocolor is correct. It should be a 2-color pair. A good identity should be correct. Encouraging people to play black as their main color is a nice thing to do. It seems to be secondary more often than you expect. But on the flip side, if I have pack 1 pick 1 pacifism or pestilence, like, I am going to force black as hard as I possibly can because I want to play that pestilence, and I already have a card that encourages me to go overboard with black. And if it wasn't that there was really no other wrath kind of effects at black, like, I probably would cut pestilence, just because it encourages such a hard turn in how you should be drafting. If there was a way to play something other than pestilence as a wrath effect, that didn't encourage necessarily going all in on just black, I'd be all for it. But as it stands, I think that a card that pays off, a 2-color deck much better than a 1-color deck is the kind of the eyebrow wiggle and kind of direction I want to try to push that to go. Am I making sense, Omni? I want to do a gut check here, that I'm not too far off the rails.
I think that's reasonable. I think that there's a little bit of a mixed signal here with Defile going in and Gary going out, just because they both sort of reward a slightly more heavy black leaning deck. But I think like Grey Merchant, the cap on it is a lot higher than what you can realistically expect Disfigure to do. I don't know. I'm perhaps not making the most sense, but I think Grey Merchant is just fine a lot of the time, and I think that it could probably stand to at least leave the cube temporarily.
Let me think about it this way. So I agree. I think Grey Merchant is just fine. I also suspect that Defile is going to be great. And I think that if you look at them as 1-for-1, like, a little bit of mixed single, maybe, but then also switching to a 1-mana black spell that's just going to probably do more work than Grey Merchant most of the time in a black deck, and unclutter the 5-drop slot. Like, I think it also it's net neutral for the cube, but it smooths out and makes it play better. Defile is going to be as close as we get to Fatal Push for Comet. Agree. I wish they had just downshifted Fatal Push in Modern Horizons, but that wasn't the set for that because they're only printing new cards and cards that aren't in Modern. So, yay. But no, that's a good point, and I'll have to think about that a little bit more because you're right. Like if I'm saying, hey, let's not encourage playing mono black with Gray Merchant. Also, I added this removal spell that encourages playing mono black. It is kind of a tit for tat kind of huh. So
I think the thing is that Defile kind of maxes out at about like I want to say like 5 or 6 is where you kind of hit the point of diminishing returns on that card. And with Gray Merchant, you're kind of incentivized to play a heavily black deck and specifically play as many cards with a lot of black pips in it. So I think that Gray Merchant biases you more towards a monocolor deck than Defile does.
Right, like Defile, if you get 3 swamps in play, Defile is still great. If you just have Gary in your blue-black deck and like you drain for 2 when he hits the battlefield, it's kind of a shrug, like just okay. Yeah, something to think about. It's a good, definitely more to think on that. So let's talk about a card that doesn't take much thinky. Goblin Champion. Goblin Champion. Let me type that in quick. Oh, I think Omni's on it. Goblin Champion is, a haste exalted. So effectively it's a 1/2 on the first turn. And it just pumps your best creature if you're only attacking with it on subsequent turns. I have a hard time not seeing this be a great 1-drop. But it also plays out very differently than, just dump a 1-drop and start swinging because it's only good when you're attacking with one creature. And so it actually makes you rethink kind of what your red strategy is. And I don't think the red decks are swinging with their own creatures often. Yeah, and so that's what's giving me pause is that on paper, this card reads right. Like, wow, this is just going to be great. But but in action, I think that the red decks are better when they're attacking with multiple creatures and making the opponent have to make a choice. Like, okay, do they have a burn spell? Like, if I block with my 3/3 here, do I trade half a card and a shock for this? A shock effect for this? Making the opponent answer that question is hard. On the flip side, Raging Goblin has never been in the cube and has never been considered a particularly great card. So, I'm kind of torn where I see a lot of upside to Goblin Champion, and then, I think about how it plays out, and maybe it's not quite the card I want it to be. So I'm kind of open to feedback on this one. I'm a little mixed on it, but maybe it's more like Moonblade Shinobi. Like on my first read through, I felt really confident that this was a slam dunk, but the more I've thought about it, it's not great. I think this card is worse than Raging Goblin. I don't think that's true on me. There's so many good creatures in this cube. Like in a core set, yeah, Raging Goblin is just going to be, whatever. But I think there's so many evasive creatures and so many, like red green, right? Like being able to attack with a 4/4 Elven is way different than a 3/3. But yeah, I'm kind of waffling on this one.
I liked it, and then I thought about it, and the only place that I like it a lot is red-green because of the big green creatures. But other than that, it's not really what red's trying to do in this cube in specific.
Yeah, a lot of red's evasion is falter, which encourages tact lassitudes. Yep. So I'm, I think my net takeaway is to look a little more careful at this, but I'm starting to lean away from Goblin Champion. And there's another card I was really excited about when I saw it. Orcish Hellraiser. Are you typing it in, Mike? Yeah, there it is. So Orcish Hellraiser is a card. I think it was really fun. I had a good discussion, I think, with Usman about this card in chat the other week. And the big thing about Hellraiser is I think it sequences out much better than you expect it would. The Echo of 1 is so easy to pay when you're curving out with a limited deck, right? You just play, you play this, then you play Vioshino Pyromancer and attack with a 3/2, and if the opponent blocks and trades, you're probably killing whatever 2-drop or 3-drop they had, plus still dealing them 2 damage on top of that. It feels like it, you know, if you play this into the vanishing red creature. Oh my gosh, I am so terrible at the names today. There's a vanishing 2-drop. What is it called? Yeah, Keldon Marauders. Yeah, like Orcish Hellraiser turn 2, turn 3, Keldon Marauders, or even the other way around. Like, all right, just like just so much incidental damage, and that's what makes the red deck so dangerous. Is, you know, we're now getting to a point where, you know, there's enough burn spells attached to creatures that are just, you know, fine for rate. You know, a 2/1 that deals 2 on the way in. Maybe it trades with the token, but you've still gotten the extra 2 damage out of it. You know, it's still hit at least effectively once. You know, the same with Orcish Hellraiser, same with Keldon Marauders. It deals 2 damage, you know, no matter what. And God help you if you're white-red and you get a flicker off. Like, Ephemerate with Keldon Marauders? So much damage! And so, you know, I don't want to focus on the 2-card combos, but that, you know, that brings a smile to my face as the Thanos of the Discord. And I have a hard time not seeing Orcish Hellraisers be effective in the way the current cube plays a lot of combat and cares about getting some damage in. Tell me I'm wrong. Card is very good. Hey, we agree. That's great. All right. Moving on. So let's talk about Bogardan Dragonheart. This card I didn't like reading on my first pass through, and then I started thinking about it more and more, and it's basically just an upgrade to On-Crop Invader. Like, On-Crop Invader is on the ground in first strike and costs mana to sacrifice. This gives you a sack outlet effectively in red, so it's redundant with the black sack outlets. So it gives red-black something to do, but also it's pre-combat. So it makes a 4/4 and it swings with flying. And you can play it the turn it comes down. Like, play a turn 1 drop, play, you know, Goblin, you know, Dragon Fodder or something on turn 2. Turn 3, Dragonheart comes down, you swing for 4. Like, you're just forcing your opponent to either have a removal spell on the spot or, you know, or just eat 4. And quietly, this is something that I started to think more and more about. You know, it gives it 4 toughness. So if you have an opponent who, you know, has like has a disfigure or you know, a burn spell or something like that, if you have 2 little goblins to sacrifice, you know, the 200 IQ play, right, is to wait for your opponent to sacrifice, with the trigger on the stack, then you cast Defile, because haha, I'll 2-for-1 you. But if you have more goblins to throw away, like, you just sack another one. Like, you can always set its toughness to the base toughness to 4 in response to, you know, a 3 damage effect, or a, you know, or a 1, you know, 2 life effect. And the fact that it's haste is exactly what you want to do in red. So I'm like 99.9% sure this just swaps for On-Crop Invader, and that's the end of the story. So everybody got a foil On-Crop Invader. Enjoy. I don't know what else you'll do with it, sorry. But Dragonheart's very good. That new Raging Goblin is real damn bad. Well, Usman's joined the party. Welcome, Usman. I'm starting to come to that conclusion. Just like the service at this restaurant. Wow! Alright, Usman's spitting fire tonight. Butcher of the Horde. Alright. Common Butcher of the Horde seems sweet. Yeah, it's basically... it's not quite Butcher of the Horde good, but good golly. It feels very close. So let's talk about a green card. There's actually only a few green cards. I was a little surprised with the overall power of the green cards, because I think other colors have started to catch up to green, and I'm waiting for them to kind of bump up green's baseline a little bit more. If that makes maybe that doesn't make sense, but I feel like green's starting to get like the shorter end of the power stick. You know, like they reprinted Colossal Dreadmaw in like 3 sets back to back, and like it's still just a 6/6 with trample for 6. Like it's not that good. Like it's fine, but I think we can do better. So Mother Bear is I think I think a good card for the cube. It's one of those really nice, if you're green black aristocrats, like wow, you get 3 creatures out of this card, curves out well. It lets you trade and gives you a 5-drop effectively later on. It gives you tokens, 2 tokens later on. So if you're green red and you kind of have some token effects, or you're green white and you need some things to pump, it works well. I think it's a generically good card, and I think it's one of the best 2-drops that green's gotten in a while at common. So I just see it playing out very pleasantly. And who doesn't want a Mother Bear with 2 adorable cubs that come back to avenge her? It's a story all in one card. It's beautiful. I think Mother Bear I was planning to just add to the cube. But this card I would be looking to swap for Elvish Rejuvenator. So I want to talk about Springbloom Druid. So my buddy DJ over at Jumbo Commander previewed this card for Commander. And I think it's correct. I think it's just a good staple card for Commander. Like, I'm going to shove this into my Farika deck so fast. Like, I cannot wait to dump it in because it's just such a nice little effect. But basically, Harrow on a stick. It's sorcery speed, which I think makes Harrow much more fair. It's an enters the battlefield trigger, right? So unlike Harrow, where if you counter it, you're down a land and a spell, which really sucks. So this basically fixes the downsides of Harrow and gives you the upside of having a 1/1 body. I am concerned about kind of encouraging too many multicolor shenanigans, but I haven't been very happy with how the look at the top X, if you see a land, put it on the battlefield, tapped creature has played out. So in a nod to Omni, yeah, strong Omni vibes for sure. In a nod to Omni, I think it's totally fair to swap in, this card for, another card that's just not as effective at what I'd hoped it would do, which would be the kind of ramp card that you would play if you're stretching and you really do want to play that 3-color deck with green. I don't want to encourage it, but I think Springbloom Druid is just good, and I don't see any reason that we shouldn't have it in over a very mediocre kind of ramp spell with Elvish Rejuvenator. Any thoughts on that, Omni, or
I think it's a fine card. I do prefer it over Rejuvenator, and the fact that you do have to sack the land does represent some level of cost, but yeah, like, this can just be a ridiculous 5-color enabler, but you got to really work for it. You at least have to, like, think about these things instead of just being able to jam it.
Yep. As long as you have to be strong green for that, then that's reasonable. Yeah. So this, if you're basically heavy green and you run Springbloom Druid, like, you can reasonably splash, some multicolor removal spell or a multicolored bomb, and that's kind of what green has always been already good at. Like with Rampant Growth and Croson Tusker, I mean, it's never been hard to splash if you're playing a green deck. So it's not about, I think if you're not base green, if you're not heavily green, the value of Springbloom Druid goes way down because you're going to want to have to sacrifice a land, and that kind of, I think, keeps it in check, over something like, Old Harrow, which you could play in a, just a 3-color deck with blue and discard it to something else, or get to instant speed, fix something if you don't want to counter it. This makes you commit to it on your turn, and it puts a body into play, which is much more interactive than I'm going to sit here and do nothing and remove your creature or Harrow into 2 other colors for a 5-drop.
It's definitely more fair than the blue Spell Shaper that has Harrow attached to it, which I like a lot. And then
that card's from Planar Chaos. I always forget the name of it, but that card is just silly in Commander. if you get to untap and use it like 2 or 3 times, it gets out of hand real quick. Repeatable Harrow in mono blue is not fair. Not even close. Oh, and it also puts them onto the battlefield untapped, which is very nice. That's also one of the big differences, is that Harrow would put them on the battlefield untapped, so you could Harrow into a 2-mana counterspell or 2-mana removal spell. This puts them on tapped. So again, you play at a pace that's much more appropriate for the trade-off of having to wait a turn to get your benefit, or getting to do 2 things in 1 turn. You're probably just doing this the turn you cast it, Springloom Druid, versus Harrow, where you would consistently do 2 things that turn. Talking about doing 2 things, Trumpeting Herd is just stupid good, right? Like, it's not Elephant Ambush, which is an instant, and I really like, because people forget Elephant Ambush exists until you make a 3/3 in response to them attacking with like a 2/2. It's like, whoops, green can do that. But Trumpeting Herd is 4 mana, make 6/6. Like, this is the kind of common that I expected a couple more of for green in Modern Horizons. Rebound is just so good. Did you call it Elephant's OP? Yeah, like on my 4th turn, I am happily tapping out for this and making a 3/3. I'm going to untap and make another 3/3, attack to the 3/3 I have, and probably play a 5-drop that's really obnoxious too. You're just putting a ton of power out. And in terms of what the other colors get to do, it's just I think it's a big leap beyond. So I don't see this not getting in the cube. And Pima Outrider is the card I was thinking about cutting, because it's a Pima Outrider is a 3/3 or trample, and it has whatever that Mega Servo or +1/+1 counter effect is. I forget the name of it. Fabricate. But Pima Outrider, like 4/4 trample for 4 is okay. A 3/3 trample and a 1/1 is typically the mode you would use for it, and instead you get a 3/3 and a 3/3 for the same amount of mana. I think I'm okay with that trade. A 3/3 on layaway is better than a 1/1 now. Yeah, I think it's the most succinct way of putting it. So let's talk about things that aren't 3/3s and 1/1s. Savage Swipe. So Savage Swipe is just better Prey Upon. Like, it's Prey Upon, but it says if you have a bear, it's just better. So this is one of those slam dunk cards where, I think Prey Upon's still fine. Maybe Prey Upon is finally on the way out. Like, it's just not strong enough anymore now that Savage Swipe exists. But there's so many bears in the cube. So many power 2 creatures in the cube. And that is important to note, that it's not just, it doesn't actually look for a 2/2, it looks for a bear. So, oh man, what is the 2/3 in white for 2 mana? You gotta return a permanent to your hand. Can't remember the name of it. Around 40% of the creatures in the cube get the pump. Yeah, it's absurd. Core Skyfisher, that's what it is. So your Core Skyfisher on turn 3 can become a 4/5 that eats a 4/4 and then hits your opponent for 4. Again, 2-card combo. Let's not look too deep onto that, but the number of creatures with 2 power is just massive. And I love how this card will probably play out in the cube. It is just a great removal spell. And that was another card I was just looking to add to green. Basically, I had kind of chosen 2 cards to add to each color, and then made some swaps. I think Moonblade Shinobi and Goblin Champion are going to be rethought, so probably some shuffling to come with that. But there's some other cards in the set that I didn't talk about that I think are good to revisit, and I would love to get your feedback on whether or not they make sense for the cube, maybe what you thought you were going to do with them with the cube, or why they should or shouldn't make it. The first is Recruit the Worthy. So there was this Future Sight card printed called Saproling Swarm, and it was basically basically this card with also Convoke. And as it turns out, that card was just a little bit broken. Sapperling Sprout Swarm. Yeah, there it is. It makes Sapperlings, but yeah. So if you can, the TLDR is that for 5 mana, you can loop this and make a 1/1, which means if you have 5 creatures in play, you get to make a 1/1 for free. And so if you're good at math, you can see that begins to snowball as the turns go on, because any multiple of 5 mana you have, or multiple of 5 mana plus creatures, becomes another creature, which just gets you more creatures. Yeah. The big difference here is that, without Convoke, you really can't snowball the same way, right? Like, you get to play another land every turn. You can play a mana rock, maybe, like tapping, oh my goodness, what is the, I'm so terrible today. There's the mana rock for 3 that when you tap it, you gain 1 life. Yeah, Pristine Talisman. So imagine a world where you're playing Recruit the Worthy and you're buying it back by tapping Pristine Talisman every turn. That looks pretty good. It feels much closer to kind of the right power level. The fact that Recruit the Worthy is an instant means that any 4 mana you have up suddenly becomes an emergency blocker, a chump blocker. You don't have to sacrifice a creature if you have the mana up for it. You can play it in response to like Predatory Night Stalker or kind of those effects if you need to protect Guardian of the Guild Pact. It doesn't target, it's not target player, so you're not going to get dunked on but when somebody has a Flag Bearer. I think Flag Bearer just targets it, but you know what I mean. It's going to just make you a 1/1. But I don't think that alone is good enough. There's so many other ways to make creatures, and I don't think anybody has been complaining that there aren't enough ways to get creatures back or make extra tokens. I just have a hard time seeing Recruit the Worthy kind of play out in a healthy way. Like, either it's too good or it's just too slow. It's not good enough. And definitely without Convoke, if it had Convoke, it would just be on the no fly list, right? Or it would cost like 3 mana and the buyback would be like 4 or 5 or something insane. Like, it would just be utterly unplayable. Sen's Enlistment, I like it a bit less than Sen's Enlistment. Yeah, like if I wanted a recursive token maker, if I felt I really needed it, I think Sen's Enlistment, would be at the top. And I've looked at that card before, but I really like playing a creature that makes a token. It just ends up working much better for a lot of the other decks. Anything that gets a creature back, anything that cares about you exiling a creature card from the graveyard. There's a lot more things that interact with creatures in graveyards and creatures in play than with tokens. And they're also subtly is a soft way to help resist the blue bounce effects, right? If you're just making a token, Sen's Enlistment, you make 2 1/1s. A Mana War that you flicker once just negates that. Versus if they bounce, one of the cavalry. I'm trying to think of the name of it. Gallant Cavalry. Bouncing Gallant Cavalry still leaves you with a 2/2, and then you get another one when you replay it. And it's one of the subtle ways that, blue looks really good and the bounce effects are really good, but they're not a catch-all answer. Like if you're faced with a choice, like, you quickly learn that the correct play is to, somebody plays Gallant Cavalry and you want to counter with a Mana War. You bounce the 2/2 token and then you trade your Mana War away. And then that stops the, there's no looping, there's no additional cycling from that. It's a 1-for-1 answer at that point, which is much more fair than a world where you're just making tokens and they just get eaten alive by any bouncing and flickering. Does anybody feel Recruit the Worthy is actually worthy? So let's talk about a card that probably is closer, and that's Rank Officer. When I read this on my first pass, it just read bad. Okay, I pay 4 mana, and I get a 3/1 and a 2/2, and I have to discard a card. So I'm probably going down a card to do that. It just, I compared it to Gallant Cavalry and is a great example, and I'm just like, this is just not the same. A 3/1 can't really block well. It gets blocked really, really easily by all the token effects. Um, but it does have the ability to exile a creature card and dome an opponent for 2, and that's the kind of thing that I think everyone kind of glued to a little bit more. But there's so many other ways to dirtle out a win in the cube, and so many other more powerful ways to kind of grind out a win. If this was, if this was a 3/3, and it could block pretty well, and you could tap it to exile, a creature and hit, at the end of the turn while you're being defensive, I think that it would play out much differently. And I like Dirtle, and this is resoundingly met. Yeah, so, it's really exciting to think about curving out and making, playing a 4-drop in black that gets you 2 creatures. There aren't that many cards that do that without help. And this one does need help. You need to discard a card, but, by the 4th turn, you probably can safely discard a land if you're casting your 4-drop. That's pretty reasonable. Galaxy Replay. Target yourself with lightning, then activate this twice for that last point of damage. That... yeah, that does not make as much sense. But yeah, I think people were really warm to Rank Officer, and I think it sounds like it's one of those cards that plays out pretty well in the Modern Horizons limited format. That was the sense I got from pre-release weekend, and maybe we'll see some more from when people keep drafting it pretty consistently and have more playtime with it. But in the cube where there's just tons of 1/1s easily, it's really not going to get chances to attack. And it's exile a creature card. If it was from a graveyard, stripping creatures out of your opponent's graveyard would feel really good. But this is your graveyard, and I think that you really don't want to do that in black. There's so many ways to get creatures back in black. Like, I don't want to throw creatures away. I want to buy them back and beat you down with them. It plays more like an enchantment with a suspend 1. Yeah, it's just, it's not great. So this card, I humbly asked Usman to kind of walk me through, and the next card we'll talk about, I asked for a walkthrough as well, and I'm still not sure I see it, and that might be just a shortfall on my part. So I do want to give a chance to talk about this and get some feedback. But Viashino Sand Sprinter just reads weird. It's 3 mana, 4/1, trample haste, and you got to bounce it back to your hand, and it has cycling. So if it can't do anything, you can at least cycle it. But 4 power is pretty strong. Getting to deal 3 damage and trample over, or 2 damage and trample over something is okay. But it feels weird. Like why do I want to do this over some of the other things that I can do in red? It just didn't resonate with kind of how I perceive red to work in the queue, where you're curving out, you're providing consistent threats, where when you cast a creature with haste, it sticks and it becomes a permanent threat because you're snowballing, right? The next turn, if the opponent attacks you, you can risk playing something that has haste and punishing them with the crackback and getting ahead in the race. If they stay back, you can burn in, you play your burn spell on them or the removal spell on their creature and attack through anyway. This kind of doesn't really fit into either dynamic because you want to tie up your mana every turn, or if you have to tie your mana up every turn if you want to use it. And when you don't, is cycling 1 really a great alternative? I just don't see this playing out, as effectively as maybe it was walked through to me, but I'm kind of open to feedback on that and what you think.
All right, so here's my question for you. If you had a 0 mana enchantment that just said, pay 1 red, deal 4 damage, would you?
Deal it to any target, or
Let's just say players for sake of simplicity here.
just 3 red, deal 4 to the opponent? I mean, it sounds like a 1,000 IQ play to do that, right?
So I think the thing is, if your mana gets tied up in this, it means that they're not blocking this and they're taking 4 a turn. And I think as the aggressive deck, you're generally fine with that. And if for some reason they just block this, you've removed a blocker and probably gotten in a couple points of damage at least. So I think either one of those situations, while it's certainly not ideal to have 3 mana tied up in this every turn, if they're just not blocking this, that game is over very quickly. I think the fact that this has such an aggressive stat line to it is what makes it appealing to me.
I think I get it now. This still doesn't excite me as how I play, but I understand how that sequencing makes sense. You know, I think the cycling is a bit of a misnomer. Like if you just take cycling off this card, I think that argument still holds. But I've seen a couple people note like, well, if you can't do anything with it, you can just cycle it, and that's kind of like the ultimate cycling cop out, right? Like, you know, yeah, it's really not what you need to be doing. Like if you're cycling this, like you're in desperation mode. Like you're probably looking for a blocker to stay alive rather than attacking for the win. And you know, with a lightning axe with cycling RB playable, I definitely block this every time. Yeah, I think, you know, probably. You know, again, it's just one of those cards where I think the way I think about combat and math, it doesn't click with me the same way it clicks with other people, which is fine. Like that's why I have this discussion. That's why I get a lot of feedback, is because I know I'm not going to see everything perfectly, and I don't expect to. You know, I've got a lot of awesome feedback about about blue black decks, and especially kind of the flickering decks, and kind of like people asking questions about that stuff, and that's why I want to walk through these things, because this is probably a better card than Goblin Champion, and I think I'm coming to that conclusion, thinking through like how Goblin Champion would probably play out compared to this, but overwhelmingly I think that this card's come up a lot more in terms of a card to consider than our little Gobbo. All right, so maybe Omni, you can take the lead and help me understand this one. But this one came up too, and Newsman was talking to me, and I've never really been impressed by falter effects. It's been really hard to see them be as effective as I think that they feel like they can be. I think everybody remembers when they get blown out by a falter effect just coming down and knocking out their the one blocker they played to help stabilize, and it just kind of goes down a dark path after that point. But a 5-drop that requires you to have a bunch of other creatures for it to have a payoff the turn you play it feels okay. But again, I'm not wowed by a 4/4 for 5, and a cycling where it just falters for a turn and you draw a card doesn't feel good on its own. But maybe I'm just overlooking how valuable having a double falter for a turn is, and making a 4/4 for 5 is for red.
So I think a lot of the time when the double falter actually takes effect, you're not really going to care about how big the creature is, because you're using it to break up a board stall and hopefully end the game. And I think that the fact that this does have cycling, while I don't want to fall into like the cycling cop-out, if you have like 2 lands in play and not much else going on, you use this to chip in damage, hit another land, and hopefully continue on your game plan. I think it has just enough utility in the 2 separate modes that it's nice to have in a red deck that has a slightly higher curve. If you're super low to the ground, I think this doesn't make the cut. But I think if you're a red X deck that's planning to go a little later, the fact that this can make combat math really difficult in the late game, or at least help you chip in with some early damage, is a reasonably solid effect.
Why doesn't this have haste? That's the question I'm asking. Man, I wish this had haste. Cycling Clone should let you play a haste creature alongside it. Yeah, I try not to look at... so this is a good aside moment. So I try not to look at cards in the context of 2-card combos, right? That if I have 5 mana and I need to... and I want to do 2 things in a turn, would I always count on having a creature that lets me... that has haste for 3 mana to play alongside it? Probably not. It's obviously really good in that scenario, and the deck would want to, if you're drafting a red heavy deck to be aggressive like that, that would be a great thing that you would draft towards. Like that's a reason you draft those cards together in a deck. But I think one of the strengths of I suspect, I should say, one of the strengths of the cube, as I know it, is that almost every card can stand totally on its own. You know, it inherently has value and power on its own that gets better when you draft it in an archetype. And so you don't have to do what the cube, you know, quote unquote, tells you to do, because it doesn't, you know, it doesn't force you into that. But you just naturally get the benefit by making those connections and going, hey, if I've got sacrifice outlets and I've got creatures that don't mind if they die once or twice, you know, it naturally pairs up well. And you know, thinking about Cyclops, you know, it's naturally going to pair well with efficient 2-drops and 3-drops that are going to want to, you know, cut through an extra turn or two, especially if the thing that lets you cut through draws you into you know, another hasty creature or another burn spell. If you have this and 2/2/2s, this can have haste, and that it helps those get in. Yeah. I guess the question is what do we not like in red? I've basically hammered the top end of the red curve. Like there's nothing big left in red, because they've all kind of played out a little clunky. So I'm kind of wondering, like, what am I, what do we do? Like, what do we not like instead of this? Straight at it could be, you know. So the top end in red right now is a Stormfleet Pyromancer, Flurry of Horns. Those are basically the last 2 5-drops, because I've cut everything bigger. We just cut it for Grim Initiate and Honor the Godfair in the last draft. Thunderous Wrath. Yeah, I mean, maybe cutting out a big dumb burn spell that you can sometimes miracle. Like, it feels real bad for the opponent when you miracle it and just dome them for the win or dome their best creature. Gathering Raiders is not a red creature. Get out of here. Doesn't count. It's colorless. Sneaky. Also not a 5-drop. Correct. Yeah, it is a ghost morph that happens to be red if you flip it up, and is really good. Really good when you flip it up and it turns into a 5/5 out of nowhere, because it goes from 2/2 to 5/5, which is not something you can play around. Maybe Thunderous Wrath is the right cut. You know, I think Burn is plenty strong in the cube, and people get how good Burn is. I added Thunderous Wrath because it was a downshift, and it's one of the few ways that red can get rid of something big. But maybe that's the best way to make red weak, is that it has definitely the best curve and definitely the best way to curve out. And adding a Falter, you know, is very red. It gives you a turn to attack through something big, but it's not a forever answer. Versus Thunderous Wrath, which kills just about everything in the cube, and also is a Lava Axe if you really need it. I'd be sad to lose a mechanic. Wrath is also a high delta. Yeah, it's like 6 mana for 5 damage is not super exciting. 1 mana for 5 damage is stupid. Yeah, I mean, I don't think Miracle's the best mechanic, like, especially for players that aren't used to playing with it, because I've seen this so many times during the Innistrad block when Absent Restore came out, was that, you know, it's really hard to bake in, you know, look at, you know, as you draw the card, draw it to the side and look at it first, because it's so easy just to draw it to your hand, and that's the muscle memory we have from other Magic. I think honestly, mechanically, Thunderous Wrath has been like the biggest feel bad, where somebody goes from, wow, this would have been amazing if I could miracle it, to I missed my chance, and now, you know, either the opponent's got to like let me do it, and then I kind of feel bad, or I feel bad because I can't. And I'll think about that. I think Thunderous Wrath is probably the most cuttable burn spell, just in terms of the power delta and, you know, how it's played out in the past. So a card Usman brought up, I think, I know somebody else brought it up, Twin Silk Spider. Twin Silk Spider. So it's 3 mana, make 2 1/2s with reach. Um, honestly, it doesn't. you know, I hate there entirely. The card is fine. I think the card is fine, but I don't think 1/2s with reach are just are great. They're okay for tokens. They're okay on defense. Um, I guess it's not create 2 tokens. It's you get a 1/2 spider and then you create another spider with it. I unearth this thing a lot in draft. Yeah, I mean it plays nice with unearth and you make a bunch of bodies. But I think there's just so many other good things to do at 3 mana in green. Do we really need a spider making token creature? I don't feel like I have a need for it, and I don't feel the cube is better with it. It just feels like more tokens. Nice to have, but not that nice. Yeah, I mean, there's so many other ways to just kill what flies. Versus relying on a spider, especially a 1/2 spider. Looking at green quick. I mean, like, green creatures are like Jungle Wayfinder, Jungle War Pioneer, Scion of the Wild, Scion Summoner, Yavimaya Elder, Yavimaya Sapherd. Just things that are much more powerful. Centennial Woodreaders can technically be a 3-drop. It's you're probably drawing 2 cards with it. It's a nice little payoff for the nice little kicker payoff. I think I'd rather make just bigger tokens that can attack, or make a bigger creature that can attack and leaves a token behind, like Sapherd. Maybe swapping Sapherd is right. You end up with 2/4 reach rather than 3 power, 3 defense on the ground. I'm getting one, but I'm not including it in the first pass. What do you mean? What do you mean, Omni? Omni is typing now.
I'm just not super high on it. I think like I could see the argument for it just because it does stonewall a lot of the flying tokens that exist in the cube, and mine as well. But it's not something I'm ecstatic for. That coupled with the fact that like I do truly detest the art. That is way too lifelike of a spider, but it just I don't think the need is there for me personally, and I can definitely I think it's it's a good one to like put on the back burner as a maybe in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's okay, but we're not looking for okay cards. We're looking for great cards, and I the scary spider argument doesn't sway me, but the it's just fine. It does. Maybe that's kind of the sum that I have for this card. Is green struggling early against flying threats currently? No. Most of the flying threats are smaller than green's creatures. Once you get an elephant, like a 3/3 on board, like all of your fight spells become live to just eat flyers alive. Penumbra Spider is a top pick. Eerie Bowmaster's like a 3/4 with Megamorph. Green doesn't really, the flying gets in. If it gets in early, yeah, green's going to take some damage, but green's creatures are much better at dealing with flyers in a longer game. So it just comes down to stabilizing. Like I haven't heard people complain about all the flyers. Like it's not feedback I've gotten, but maybe I haven't heard that feedback. So that's kind of why that's why I talk this through is, if flyers were being a little too dominant, yeah, I think an easily recurable, multi-token spider maker, is not a bad way to kind of maybe nudge that the other way. So Fountain of Vicar is a card I originally liked on my first pass, and I was pretty convinced like I would add it and and make it a thing. So it's not efficient and it's not sexy, but there is one key difference in looking at this versus the Guardian Idol. is that this does not come into play tapped. So if you have 6 mana, you have a 3/3 blocker the turn you play this. Which I don't think is good, but it is an important distinction. You can't play Guardian Idol and save yourself. You can with Fountain of Ichor. I don't think that should sway any of us here, but I do like the, you know, things that turn into creatures for a turn effects. Broadly speaking, that you can control easily on demand. You know, Guardian Idol is great because it's a ramp spell, and it turns into a creature or a blocker, you know, when you need it, or an attacker when you're ahead. Live looking and all that reach we just heard. Yeah. Yeah, Mr. Fantastic. I'll take that analogy. You know, a little stretch. You know, I think I like this effect because I just personally like it, but I don't have it on like my definitely add, definitely include. But I did want to talk about it a little bit more. How does this compare to Pristine Talisman? It doesn't at all. Pristine Talisman is so busted. Like, that is not a fair comparison. You know, I would compare this to, like, if we wanted to encourage more omni-check ways of drafting the cube, a mana rock that gives you any color that is also a colorless creature on demand, you could do a lot worse. You do a lot better, but you could also do a lot worse. Ichor adds a color pie, adds a color compared to that. Yeah, it quietly has a lot of advantages. The big downside being 3 mana to do anything is, I think the if I'm just curving out its mana, yeah, and we would never think about adding Manalith or Darksteel Ingot or anything, just because, you know, it's just not what this cube needs. You know, you don't need to have common mana fixing, you know, in colorless for a lot of effects, and we already have some great stuff at 2 mana, which is great. 3 mana is a lot, and that's kind of fundamentally why we're not going to talk about this card more. So the last card I want to talk about is Cave of Temptation. You know, we haven't run the filter land for a while. I cut them all because it's just kind of meh. I don't think basically spend an effective 5 mana. Remember, when you have to pay mana and tap the land to get an effect, it costs effectively 1 more because you have to use the mana that you would have been able to get from Cave of Temptation to do it. So 5 mana, blow up a land, put 2+1/+1 counters on something. I think it'd be much more compelling if you could do it as an instant, but the fact that it's a sorcery is just blah. Like, it's not a combat trick. It doesn't really fix mana in an efficient, effective way. You know, there's no payoffs really in the cube for +1/+1 counters. So getting some +1/+1 counters out doesn't really help any other creatures you have. You know, there's a couple persist creatures, you know, okay, but it still puts 2 on there, so it's not even that efficient for, you know, recycling a persist creature 1 more time. You know, I think it's a fine card, and I think it'll have a home in, you know, some commandery shenanigans when you want to add some counters to something or fix mana in a really cheap way. But I did want to mention it because it is effectively, you know, one of the better spell lands we've seen at common in a while, and it's just nowhere near as good as it could be. Like, they clearly put the sorcery speed rider on there for a reason from playtesting, and I just can't figure out why. If this was just any time, I think it'd be much closer to talking about. Yeah, I like spell lands. I'm tepid on this, and I am too. And I don't even think I talked about it in. I did talk about it in the rundown for the quick hits, but it was basically in the same thing. But it's also like a $5 foil that everybody loves for some reason, so I want to make sure that I wasn't missing something. Something like the Uncommon Desert's a common. Yeah, those would be great. Man, I'd love that. Where the Dom spell lands were common. Yeah, you know, I think that they correctly made sure to put, you know, some put a focus on putting in colored cards rather than, you know, a bunch of common lands to clunk up drafts in Modern Horizons. But, yeah, I really hope that we go back to like some Zendikar like set again someday, and we get more spell lands. Because with the power level they're pushing at now, I think we would see much more exciting things. Um, and that's the only reason I can think that they reprinted the Onslaught common cycling lands at uncommon, was just to avoid clunking up the common, you know, land, you know, packs with like one or two common lands, you know, in basically every pack. Um, I was a little sad to see that, but can we have those? Well, I used to have them and the Urza Saga cycling lands, but they were just kind of meh. You know, they're not that exciting to draft, and they don't really do that much. When I did have the cycle of spell lands, I actually had Baron Moore in for the black spell land, because the two options were one was, you know, drain the opponent of one life, which is mediocre at best, and the other one was exile their graveyard, which was almost totally irrelevant. You know, you want to do it to the black deck, not do it from the black deck. So the cycling land was just as close as I could get to a black spell land, where black gets the trigger resource and it feels good with like control effects. So, you know, I could revisit that in the future, but I just don't see a reason to have more common lands in the cube. Like, we have a bunch of mana fixing, and that's already, I think, plenty. Mortuary Mire, yep, Mortuary Mire I think was pretty close. You know, basically you get a free regrowth for a creature, not regrowth, reclaim on a creature. You know, it's okay. But I also don't think it's great, and I think it's also kind of a weaker form of recursion. Yeah, reclaim. Just put any card. I miss reclaim. I used to have that in the cube for some reason, because it was a pet card, and then everyone told me it was not very good, and I said okay. Those are all the cards that I wanted to kind of talk about and get some feedback on. I love these discussions. Help me reframe thinking about these cards. Yeah, and I really appreciate a lot of the feedback that comes in, because it does the same for me. So I'm glad you get a lot of the same out of it. Are there any other Modern Horizons cards we want to talk about or discuss? I'll let people type. Okay, ransack the lab. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put one in your hand and the rest into your graveyard. So why does everyone like that card so much? Because it reads like a very meh, you know, card selection. Like, it's fine. It's a sorcery. I think it's okay, but you know, you can just draw cards in black for the same amount of mana. You know, this feels like a lot of work.
I think for me, it's mostly the fact that it gives a little bit more of an interesting texture to the cube. The fact that you do get to dig a little bit deeper and make a selection from them is nice. Not having life loss attached is a somewhat upside, but my personal cube has what is it? Strategic planning, the blue version of this, and I've been enjoying that. And black cares a little bit more about the graveyard, so I'm putting it in there just because I've enjoyed the effect in blue. I'll probably enjoy it in black. Thought it was relevant to bring up.
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, maybe I've been a little gun shy about those effects, because I used to think about you know, graveyard matters kind of theme, right? And when that didn't really pan out, and we finished killing it off and getting everything out right before they printed Surveil, which really helps a graveyard matters theme, oddly enough. You know, I don't know, like I remember strategic planning, and you know, it wasn't really a big deal to talk about, because it's in blue, right? Like, you're thinking about all the other ways to draw cards in blue, and you're like, why would I play that when I can just, you know, literally draw a card and not have any downside? Winding Way. You know, choose a creature land, top 4 in, Put all cards chosen this way into your hand, the rest in your graveyard. Yeah, so this is a pretty, you know, Sulch Stampede, mulching Stampede. Um, you know, I like how Ransack the Lab feels in black. I'm just not sure it needs it. You know, we have two other ways to draw multiple cards, and we have, you know, several creatures that just draw a card on the way in. Um, I don't know, like does black need more? Should black have more card draws? Maybe the better question is you know, is that kind of missing from some of the black decks? Like as much as I like being able to dig and find a, you know, and find a card, you know, I'm also a little less hesitant to make Pestilence easier to set up every game when you draft it. So, you know, there is a trade off. And for what it's worth, Omni, I did have a buddy ping me. He was trying to build a budget blue black zombie deck for a buddy of his, and strategic planning was one of the cards I recommended because it kind of hits a sweet spot of putting stuff into the graveyard and that actually benefits the zombie deck.
It feeds Gurmag Angler. It can't be half bad. I do think Winding Way is actually sneakily very good.
Oh, Winding Way. It used to be Endless Worm. You remember that Urza Saga card? It was a rare. It went on forever. Am I misremembering that? Endless Worm. Yeah. It's not quite the same art, but you know, it feels like the same kind of, feels like a subtle nod. Um, the surest card design. Yeah, it's you know, for the enchantment block that they printed. I think Winding Way is sneakily good. So that's a good question. So let's say we're in a world where Corpse Churn and Winding Way, which feel like very similar effects, although not Corpse Churn, Ransack the Lab, because it's a sorcerer. Ransack the Lab and Winding Way are good enough for the cube. Should we be looking at strategic planning too? So blue has better options. So would we be looking to run, you know, Winding Way and Corpse Churn just because we want to put the best flavor of that's outside of blue in for those colors? You know, is it net better for that?
So I think with Winding Way, the fact that it early game you can pick up lands if you need them, and late game just restocks you on creatures, hopefully, is really, really solid. And I think that giving green a very specific mode of card draw is nice, in that it only ever gets you one type of thing. You're not guaranteed to hit, which sure is sometimes a feel bad, but I like the fact that this allows you to see a bunch of cards and specifically get the cards that you need at that point in the game.
It is pretty nice to name creature and then draw 3 creatures for 2 mana. I'd love that scenario too. Okay. I think I'm warming up to Winding Way a little bit. I'm still, yeah. I'm still not feeling Ransack the Lab though. Like it just feels like a worse version of things that we can already do in black. And we can just draw cards in black already. You know, why do I wanna bin some?
Ransack is definitely worse than Winding Way, partially because of the color it's in, and partially because it doesn't actually get card advantage without other cards. But it's still an interesting effect. seems like
Yeah, I definitely need to think about it a little bit more. It's not just a clear don't do anything. Dark Bargain. Yeah, top 3 cards, put 2 of them in your hand and the other in your graveyard. Yeah, like Dark Bargain is very very similar, but it's 2 colorless more, but much more painful and slower to come off, but it's still an instant. I don't know, I like Dark Bargain a lot when I got to play with it when it was unlimited. Wait, what did I realize? I could corpse churn into Whisper Agent in Pauper. Dark Bargain is just black green of Revelation. Yeah. it pretty much is. Painful. Yeah, good stuff to think about. I do like Winding Way. Thinking about it, and maybe that's a good swap for. What would we think about a swap? Winding Way for Centennial Wood Readers. Does that feel correct? Multiple people are typing. Yeah, Omni approves. Yeah, so I like Wood Readers a lot. It's actually been super obnoxious for as an aggro player to play against, because the ramp deck can, people. It's the old go-to example I use is Mark Rosewater talked about playing this invasion standard deck, and he had 4 Grizzly Bears, and he just played like Grizzly Bears, and they worked really well, and he won. And then somebody told him that they were actually Titan Cavus, and then he, misplayed them and went for the big trampoline version and lost a lot the following week. Satania Wood Readers, I always seem to run into a player who understands that they should not wait until they have 6 mana to try to draw 2 cards, that they should just play it as a 1/4 for 3 and just stonewall my little goblin army. So I'd love to see the card cut just because I like attacking with creatures, but Standard Wood Readers does a lot of work, and because you get to play 6 mana and at least draw 2 cards if you draw it late in the game, it doesn't feel like it's as bad as some of the other things that just give you one. If it was 4 GG, 1/4 draw 2, we wouldn't even talk about it at all. But the fact that it's modal makes a huge difference. 6 mana, maybe hit some creatures you cast next turn, versus 2 mana, hit some creatures and then cast them the leftover 4 mana. Yeah, Winding Way, feels like it fills a very similar role at 6 mana, but it plays a very different role in the early game, and that's kind of why I want to look at it that way. Is I think it feels like a very similar effect, right? Like you end up some cards, you get value out of it, but is losing a 1/4, for defensive reasons, okay. I'm keeping 2 landers in way. You like to look dangerously. And I probably would keep that hand too. Running monkeys and Omni is typing. 5 lander way and a dork feels fine too. Yeah. Okay, good to think about. I totally overlooked Winding Way when I was looking over the cards. I kept a 1 non-green and a way on a multi-5. Did not go well. Womp. Sorry. Are any other Modern Horizons cards we want to talk about? Oh, Lava Dart. That's right. Lava Dart's okay. We did not discuss the slug. You'll have to link the slug. Yes, we'll discuss it. Um, you know, I mean, Lava Dart is, you know, 1 red mana, sacrifice a mountain, deal with dragon fodder. It seems fine, but I don't think Burn's particularly hurting for value. And there's already stuff like Twin Bolt that we don't play that can just deal 2 damage to anything for just 2 mana without having to sacrifice a mountain. There the upside of, I guess, discarding it to something else is there, but we don't really focus on discard outlets and discard rewards. So again, like, if you're thinking about a scenario where you discard Lava Dart to honor the God Pharaoh, yeah, but it's just like one of a 2-card combo. Not enough spells matter payoffs for me to like it. Yeah, it's just it is a good card, and I think if you put Lava Dart in your Pauper cube, because now it's easy to get a cool foil copy, and you like that, I think it's totally defensible. I just don't think it really adds anything, and it is obviously more powerful than other options we already have in the cube. I definitely did look at it and think about the nice new shiny Lava Darts. 2 more prowess creatures, I like it. Yeah, if we had like a blue-red, cast 2 spells, get a benefit, have a bunch of prowess creatures kind of theme, rather than just, are we casting a spell? As kind of like the blue-red theme, I think it'd be a very different discussion. Being able to use 1 mana, 1 mountain, and get 2 spells off in a turn would be really good for some blue-red decks, and I think that's why Lava Dart, I think, shines in Modern Horizons, is there's just a ton of payoffs for it. Gluttonous Slug. So let's talk about that quick. It's an 0/3 for 2 with Menace and Evolve. And no amount of salt will save you. Good to know. So every time I look at this card, I see where people are coming from, right? Like, you just play literally any creature after this, you have a 1/4, and more likely you're going to play a couple creatures, and it's going to become, probably a 3/6 in short order, if it sticks around. Even Eternal, yeah. Yeah, Slug. Yeah, Gluttonous Slug. Yeah, 2-card combos. 2-card combos good. Gluttonous Slug into Aven Eternal feels pretty good. Using removal on this feels so bad, but it is 2 mana. I guess that's the question. Is it feels like it caps out at 3/6 a lot of the time. Yeah, I think that's the pretty natural spot. It's pretty easy to get up to 3 power creatures to enter the battlefield. So you should be able to hit a 3/6. So I guess my question is that good enough? It's good on attack and defense. Is that fine? Like, if you don't have other creatures, like if you're on your back foot, Gluttonous Slug just does very little. If you don't have more creatures to curve out with, if you're blue-black control and you're not playing a ton of creatures, it's also not very strong. I'm just trying to imagine, like, what archetypes, what decks that we draft in the cube or we have in the cube that are super happy if we've got a Gluttonous Slug, curving out, or somewhere in the mid game when we start, before we play more creatures. A couple people are typing. I'll let you catch up here. Same deck that has Disowned Ancestor. Black-white mid-range is pretty cool. Pestilence Tribal. Actually, yeah, this card is pretty good with Pestilence. I've got a 3/6 in Pestilence. It's just never going to die. Let me do a quick update here. All right, so if we're thinking about Gluttonous Slug, and we think, I can actually agree that it seems pretty easy to do turn 2 Gluttonous Slug, turn 3 play something that play a 2/2 that also makes a 1/1. I think it's actually a pretty scary setup to to have a 2/5, on turn 3, pretty easily. I guess my question is do we want it over anything else that's already in the cube? Like, is it time to cut, like, Ruthless Ripper? Is that just not good enough anymore? Oh man, Disowned Ancestor is so nice. I've had tons of fun with that card. Do we, if we're adding Future Goblin, do we get rid of, like, Doom Dissenter? Or Throw-Kill Assassin? 1/2 Death Touch for 2 mana. Sultai Emissary. Is there just an obvious swap where it makes more sense to swap it in for something else? There's like Deathbloom Cloud. There's Higher Blade. Higher Blade's been okay. I think stuff that's 4 or more is pretty good. I do have a side note about a 4-drop. Slug probably goes in the black aggro deck that everyone knows is a trap. Yeah, Throw-Kill is really good in defense because it eats 1/1s and it trades up, which is pretty nice for a 2-drop. Trades up to any size. Here's a card I want to ask everyone about, and I've not had as much success with it as I thought, but maybe it's just my experience. So we got to add Slum Reaper with Ultimate Masters, and I think it's because there's so many creatures and tokens, it's really hard for it to be a maximum payoff. It feels like a nice upgrade to like a 1/1 token. I never liked it, and this is the type of card I like. I'm not sure. You're going in a circle there, Omni. I'm sorry. 4 mana is a lot of this effect. Is a lot for this effect. Yeah, like it's I'd much rather have Butcher Ghoul than than Slum Reaper, but Slum Reaper was all I got. Like, would we want a slug over Slum Reaper? Like, is that just actually, does that play better with the other things we're already doing? I haven't seen Slum Reaper really be a big payoff, but, maybe I'm wrong. Let a couple of people type here, catch up. Clarity, I like ETV Edicts. This one isn't great. Yes. Yeah, I think I finally got there. That's definitely the clear wording. This is where I'd be able to get to play very often because I've seen this on the table once. No, it's okay. It's okay that you don't play it very often. I mean, I'll be honest. It's not like I'm playing my cube every week or anything like that either. That's why feedback like this is so valuable. But yeah, Slum Reaper is just the kind of card where, I'm not sure it's actually playing out as good as I thought it would play out. And that's kind of what I'm asking is if we're just kind of okay with this card, maybe we can swap it for another card that I think might be okay. Gluttonous Slug might be really good. I just really worry about Gluttonous Slug standing on its own, right? Like, an 0/3 with Menace just does nothing for virtually any deck. And I'm hesitant because, I know it, at worst Slum Reaper is a 4-mana removal spell, right? You play it, sacrifice your thing, your opponent's got to sacrifice something. Not super great, but it does something. It'll answer a big hexproof threat if that's the last thing your opponent has, which is great. The Slug will answer, I guess, a 1/1 token. It doesn't. It needs a lot of help to work. And when I think about Gluttonous Slug, let's compare it to another card in the set. Silumgar Sacrificer. Oh man, terrible with these names tonight. Silumgar Scavenger. It comes in and, if you don't explain anything, you still at least have a 2/3 flyer, which I think is just better than an 0/3 menace on the ground. But if you do exploit something, you have a 3/4 flyer with haste for 5 mana. That's pretty solid. It's the same kind of thing where on its own, it feels much better than the slug. I've seen someone get blown out by fungal infection with Slum Reaper on the stack. Yeah, fungal infection's really good. The card is great. Yeah, running monkeys. I'll let you type here. But yeah, maybe I need to play with the slug a little bit and see how it plays. Terror. Destroy target non-artifact, non-black creature. Yeah, it can't be regenerated. Yeah, the black control player often plays white-black. Yeah, like if you're drafting pacifisms, you do not draft edicts. Like that's that's kind of a learning curve kind of thing. But you know, I cut terror because it's one of those clunky old removal spells that is efficient, but like we have Doomblade, you know, which is basically the same card with easier to understand text, and you can regenerate from it. You know, there's plenty of other ways to kill creatures. You know, I don't think terror is particularly compelling, but it is good. The big thing is black has so many efficient ways to kill creatures. You know, I started cutting the clunkier versions of the efficient ones just because we had so many good options. And I'd much rather have removal that feels like there's counterplay to it than, you know, somebody can draft effectively a 7 terror deck and doesn't have anything to fear. What about Mop? Yeah, I think I'm talking in circles about the slug now. I think I need to think about it more and maybe get some play experience in. I didn't talk about Mob. You know, Mob. The more I think about it, it's just a bad version of a removal spell. You know, we have so many one mana and 2 mana and even 3 mana ways to really just basically kill almost anything in the cube. The big upside is if you have a ton of unconditional. It is unconditional. The big upside to Mob is if you have a ton of creatures. But if you have a ton of creatures, you're probably winning anyway. You know, again, black has so many ways to kill almost anything already. You know, I think the incremental upside of Mob is kind of low compared to the other efficient removal spells we have in black. How's it played out in limited? You know, I assume it's probably just played out as like a 4 mana or 3 mana removal spell as people tap stuff at the end of a turn and kill something or kill a big creature in mid combat. Black band together. It is kind of like a black band together. It's a lot more work. Yeah, 3 to 4 mana removal spell. So basically, we don't play Murder right now, and Murder is a 3 mana removal spell. So is this basically Murder that makes you tap 2 creatures? Like, it's easier to cast, but you're still tapping creatures to do it for an efficient cost. Definitely worse than Murder. Yeah, and that's kind of where I came to was, if this is worse than Murder, and I don't run Murder, what am I really thinking about? Doesn't require BB left up. This is true. It is easier to cast than Murder in that regard. Do you want to put a hard removal spell in control decks that won't pick? Do you want to put a hard removal spell that control decks won't pick? I think I think midway through the pack, if a control deck sees, you know, any removal spell and then mediocre cards for its deck, it's probably just going to take the removal spell anyway. I mean, this is how we end up in the situation where somebody's drafting white-black and they draft pacifisms and edict effects, right? Like, they don't go together, but you just take the removal spell anyway. So it's you can also run this in mono blue with Callous Dismissal. Yes, you are right. If you make a zombie army, you can pay for the black convoke cost. You got me. That's it. Yeah, I think I want to like Mob. I really do. I think Mob is way more compelling for a removal spell than Murder. Right? Like Murder is just do the thing. This is do the thing, but some decks get to do it really cool. But at worst, you still get an instant speed removal spell for a fair cost. And I think in Limited that plays out really well for how Wizards designs their limited formats. But I just I don't feel like there's any removal spell I would take Mob over, and I don't think that there's many decks that would be excited to pick up an early Mob. So you end up in a weird spot where somebody who probably doesn't want Mob takes it because there's no other removal spell in their color that they see, and they know they need to pick up a removal spell, and it just ends up fitting in a weird spot where nobody's really happy with it, and it may not even make the main deck. And I think that that's if that's the likely outcome, I think that's a really bad perspective to think about adding a card to the cube with, Goat Nap. So I looked at Goat Nap because we've been thinking about we've been asking for active treason back, and this is active treason, but with a very rare upside. If I don't think there's any goats in the cube outside of the changeling removal spell, but it is strictly better. Omni got it right. I think the answer is probably add active goat synergy. Get in adding just vanilla active treason. With a future update if it if it makes sense to add. I would love to see another red sacrifice outlet before adding active treason back in, because active treason is quietly it's basically falter plus, right? Like you take away an opponent's blocker and you get to attack in with it. I don't know. Like Goat Nap is strictly better, but I think Goat Nap would just be cute. Like there's really no reason to have Goat Nap over an active treason in the cube. Yeah, if we had some changelings, I'll pump my goat for a lethal. Could be a terrifying thing. Although 3 mana is pretty poor rate for a +3/+0. If you're pumping your own creature because it's a goat. Yeah, a regular cohort is thinking. You were thinking instead of the night one. The only swap I would make a regular cohort is for. Let me find it quick. So there's a spell version of Gallant Cavalry called Call the Cavalry. And, I think I would actually want a regular cohort over it, so there's kind of like a double white effect for it. The problem is that Call the Cavalry and Gallant Cavalry make 2/2 white knight tokens with Vigilance. And Vigilance is actually really relevant. So it's one of those things where a regular cohort, I think if this was printed before, if Modern Horizons hit before Dominaria, and we had basically 2 back-to-back sets where there was a nice, add Knight Vigilance creatures, we would have added a regular cohort and then cut it for one of the other Vigilant Knight makers over the Changeling maker. Paladin of the Bloodstained, yes, I think it's better than Paladin of the Bloodstained, but I think, what I think's better than a regular cohort? Rock's Veteran, which is probably taking Paladin of the Bloodstained's space. So we're already going to push Paladin of the Bloodstained out. You're absolutely right. That card can go. Nothing to be sorry about, Fizzle. Are there any other Modern Horizons cards? Like, this is insane. We've been going 2 hours nonstop, card by card, and we're not even talking about all the cards. We're just talking about the relevant ones. ones, which is crazy. Pump your own cohort with Goatnap. You're right. We could add the 2-card combo. I'm gonna make a cohort and then I'm gonna Goatnap you. You're dead. I love it. But yeah, any other Modern Horizons cards? This set is just thick as thieves with great stuff, and it's still a lot to think about. Like usually by this point, I'm super confident in a lot of the changes and what the final shape of the update will look like, and I'll make a couple tweaks. But man, I'm just nowhere near where I want to be at this point. All right, so String of Disappearances, Answered Prayers. So String of Disappearances, I think, is just not good. Like, if you're playing, it's basically, unsummon. Most of the time it's just going to be unsummon, which is fine. I think that's absolutely right. If you're doing, a 500 IQ play and paying triple blue to bounce 2 of your own creatures in response to some sort of shenanigans, okay, but there's other ways to bounce multiple of your own creatures. We're looking at flickering, which is just better. Hey, if you want to save your own creatures and get value out of them, how about not paying the mana to get the value when you want to get them back on the battlefield? And at 3 mana, I'd rather just do that. Like Withdraw is better, and plays out pretty strong. So like it is a sexy card, and I think it's cool that it exists, but it's just not. It's not as powerful, in the context of all the other things that we could be doing with three blue mana, particularly with triple blue. That's a really hard ask. Answered Prayers. So I've been waffling back and forth on this, and I think I've settled on Answered Prayers is actually not great. Gaining Sentinel Life is really good. There are some flash creatures, especially in white and especially in blue, and flicker things that let you turn it on. But it's just not. I don't think it's actually. I don't think it's actually good. It's really hard to make it be a blocker when you want it to be, which is what a control deck kind of wants. Like if this was just a 3/3 Angel with Defender, and whenever creature under the battlefield under control, you gain life. I think it would actually be a little bit better, because it would just be such a big speed bump for a slower deck to work with. Whoa. Okay. Yeah. Why control? That's what I think about when I think about a Dirtly enchantment that we just kind of want to park and gain some life off of, and maybe have like an occasional 3/3 bonk in with. Like, I feel like we're in a slower deck. I don't think about this as an aggressive card at all. I think people would play it in aggressive decks, but I think now you're really dependent on drawing creatures every turn and really curving hard. Read this as a 3/3 flyer for the token decks. That's pretty reasonable. I think. Again, I'm just not. I don't. It just doesn't resonate as like a strong play. Like, I'd rather be playing like an actual creature that actually just gets to attack you without any other work. Like, it's a lot of work to make this a 3/3 attacker every turn, and a 3/3 flyer is still just kind of par for the course. Like, it's not that hard to answer. The enchantment side of this, I think, is a little more compelling given how strong Pristine Talisman is. Just gaining a ton of life in a game is really good in this in the cube. I've not seen life gain be valuable every time I've seen it. I don't know. Maybe I'm totally wrong here, but I just I don't get the sense that Answered Prayers is the super solid aggro token card that maybe it is. Tell me how wrong I am, Omni. Walk me there. People are typing. Multiple people are typing. We just read this very differently. We obviously do. Are there no mid-range archetypes in the cube? I could see this being in one of those. So mid-range. So mid-range is odd. I think eventually most of the decks, in a good draft will end up with some mid-range feel. You just have a lot of creatures and good removal spells, and you get down into top decking when you have kind of two balanced decks. It ends up feeling like kind of like a mid-rangey kind of thing, but is the Answered Prayers really a mid-range card? I guess I'm trying to understand what you mean by being a mid-range archetype and how this would fit into it. Lots of people typing. We've actually hit the several people are typing prompt on Discord. I'm about to get schooled. That's what's happening. If it was a 1 through 3 can't block, I would be into it. I just don't think it's close enough to that. That's a fine way to put it. Pestilence Tribal plus Answered Prayers plus Recruit the Worthy. we're going for the enchantment combo. I play with White Mane Lion as counterspell, so I really wouldn't play this as a combat trick in a mid-range deck. Yeah, like White Mane Lion is awesome. Just negate your removal spell in combat, and then also probably either attack you back or still trade. Probably crazy. I'm still not familiar with the cube or cubes in general, so feel free to... No. Actually, it's really good questions, because if it doesn't make sense, that's the kind of feedback I look to try to improve the cube with. So don't feel like you're not valuable. Like thinking about how this card would play out and what kind of decks it would fit in, and are there mid-range archetypes in the cube, I think is a good question, because when I think about it, the answer is probably no. Like it's all either tempo, flying, evasion. I guess the tokens decks could be kind of mid-rangey, but they typically play much more aggressive than they do, go wide, grind you out. The control decks, are definitely slow, remove a bunch of stuff. If you're playing a 3-color special, you're in like Grixis or Naya, and kind of playing the most powerful spells you can in those colors. Still listen to all the trash. You should know. I think you're good. Yeah. So I'm lukewarm to Answered Prayers. I want to like it. I think I want to like it more than I actually should like it, or do like it. And I think that's kind of where I'm sitting, is that, we can always come back to it. Like, that's one of the secrets, is like, we don't have to get it perfect the first time. I could be totally wrong, and we need to add this card, and we're just all overlooking it. But I just don't see it playing out well. I think there's much more proactive and fun things to do. And I think, putting in a token deck and having them gain 15 life is going to feel pretty bad for the opponent. Like, life gain should, be strong, but not, just a total counter to, aggressive decks when you're trading 1 for 1. You will illustrate more comments. Yeah, I think Answered Prayers is awesome if if you're playing Commander. Like, I want to put that in an enchantment deck, like some Commander deck where I'm making a ton of like creatures, enchantment creatures or something. A Heliod deck, white red with like Perforos. Like, I'm just gonna make a bunch of creatures and gain a bunch of life and do all this stuff along the way, and I also get a creature out of the deal that I can recur with all my enchantment recursion. I think these cards are great. They're just not great for this cube. Couple of people are typing, but that's, unless there are more Modern Horizons cards we need to talk about. Excavating Anerid. If it enters the battlefield, you can sack land. If you do, draw a card. As long as there's 7 more cards in your graveyard, it gets +1/+1 and has Vigilance. Yeah, best friends with Heliod. All the clerics get prayers answered. Yeah. So excavating Anerid. Maybe we should look at that a little bit closer. So Cavu Climber is kind of the closest card that's come before it. The big difference is you've got to sacrifice a land, specifically when Excavating Anerid comes around, but but there's no evasion on it, neither Cavu Climber nor Excavating Anerid, and Threshold is easy enough to hit, but it's not like super reliable. Yeah, Marasa Behemoth. If you do 1/2, playing but I was playing Red Green Rim. Yeah, so in Modern Horizons Limited, this is a cool thing. You can do red green, blow up your lands for value. Like that is an easy. That's a specific archetype they have. Like Ren in 6 plays right into that. You get to do that. You can recur lands and then sacrifice them, and then hit Threshold and do a bunch of stuff, and that's great. Igneous Pouncer. Let's see. Cost 2 less if there's a land card in your graveyard. Yeah, there's this whole theme in Modern Horizons about having lands in your graveyard, and that's kind of a cool thing to do. I just don't know that that's it's not something that's in the Pauper cube. It's not something I've really thought about supporting. I guess the question is Excavating Anerid something we really want to be doing for 5 mana in green in the cube? Is it just better? I'm scrolling to look. Yeah, if we had cycling lands, Marasa Behemoth would be awesome. I mean, Marasa Behemoth is almost as good as Colossal Dreadmaw. Almost as good. Imperiosaur. Yeah, Imperiosaur is the easiest 5/5 to play ever. It's so easy to play in this cube. So at 5 mana, we have Airy Oofies, Lifecraft Cavalry, Nessian Asp, Overgrown Armasaur, Scatter the Siege, which doesn't really count. And then stuff's more expensive. Hooting Mandrills is definitely not a 5 mana spell. It's definitely not a 6 mana spell. It's more like 3 mana. There isn't a lot of stuff at that top end. Lifecraft Cavalry. So Lifecraft Cavalry doesn't draw you a card, but for the same mana cost, it gives you a 4/4 trample, or if you play it after combat and some permanent left the battlefield, you get a 6/6 trample for 5, which is a nice little mana efficiency over Colossal Dreadmaw. It's a green mana cheaper. I think those cards, build your own Colossal Dreadmaw pretty much, except you can count on opponent blocking stuff and trading. So when I look at not Cavu Climber, the Anerid, Excavating Anerid, and I look at Lifecraft Cavalry, it is draw a card. You are right. Someone mentioned evasion being better than the vigilance. Yeah, like I would rather have trample than vigilance on a green fatty any day of the week. I think it's fine, and that's where, and this is one of those things where its flavor is, there are some cubes that I think Excavating Anerid is much better in than mine, but I think it's pretty comparable in power to Lifecraft Cavalry, and I'd rather have the deck that encourages you to be attacking and be an attacker than than a card that's just a generic value play. Because you can probably sacrifice a land if you're casting a 5-drop. You can probably sacrifice a land and really not miss a beat, especially if you're drawing a card. But I think a 6/6 trample for 5 is much scarier than a 4/4 without any evasion, and you need a lot more work to get to make it just a 5/5. Anybody really a big supporter of Anerid and kind of want to give the counter argument? Fizzled is typing. The best part of fixing your name Fizzled is I can make you like super triple band. I can keep upping the band number. We're gonna hit Roman numerals if we go long enough, I think. Yeah, if we weren't maybe already tossing Wood Reapers, Wood Readers, I'd argue for it. Yeah, like, you know, I don't know. I think it's a good card. I just don't think it's as good as the other stuff that we could be or should be doing it at 5 mana in the cube. Buzz. I hate the cost and deck building cost. Yeah, super band the 22nd. Yes. Yeah, I like hard draw in green too. There was a 4/2 rocks that when it entered the battlefield, you drew a card and it cost 5 mana. That we were looking at that. I'm convinced by your value for value's sake isn't interesting. Yeah. Nefer rocks. Yeah, rocks Oracle. Yeah, so I this was a M19 card. Yeah, M19. And I remember looking at this and again it's just it's generic value, but it doesn't it doesn't trade up well on the offense, right? If you attack with a 4/2, it probably just trades with something with two power. It's pretty easy to trade it, and you're just drawing a card. You're drawing a card and killing a 2/2 for 5 mana in green, maybe. I just didn't feel like it was as good as the other stuff that we could do, and that's kind of, I think, the same place with the Anarid. If we had a bunch of fetch lands and cycling lands and other ways to have a land in the battlefield, I think Marasa Behemoth would be much better, and I want to like that card. So I think that's something to keep an eye on, that as we evolve the cube, if we get a bunch of cycling lands in, and as it turns out we get like 8 more terramorphic expanse effects that we can play, suddenly it becomes much more reasonable. And we quietly added another way with Springbloom Druid. That also puts a land into the graveyard. So we're not that far off, but it's definitely, I definitely wouldn't put that card in and expect players to put together that they probably can't do that without specifically working really hard to get all the effects for it. And honestly, there are a lot of players that will just first pick or second pick a Terramorphic Expanse because there's only a handful of them and they're usually really good for a deck. Yeah, the cycle lands aren't a part of the cube. They were part of a lot of cubes before I came across finding this one. So they used to be in the cube. I used to have the Urza Saga cycling lands, and at one point I actually had both cycles in. And when I had them in at the time, I also had in the Karus, because way back in the day, and this is kind of going back like 9 years, 8 years, there were no common dual lands outside of the Karus. Everything was at uncommon or higher. It was like Shivan whatever, Shivan Mountain or Shivan Forest or the Coastal Tower. It was all uncommons, even in 8th edition. So you had the Karus, and the cycle lands played really nice with the Karus. If you've ever done a nice sequence where you play a tap land, and then late in the game you draw a Karu, well, you can bounce the tap land, and then cycle it away. Basically you get to stay at mana parity, but turn a land into a card. As it turns out, having a ton of cycling lands in packs wasn't really exciting. A lot of players, you'd pick them if they were on color. Maybe you would play them, maybe you wouldn't. They were just okay, but they didn't really add anything interesting or engaging to the draft. And so what happened was when I cut the bounce lands, the cycling lands kind of went down in value because you couldn't recycle them, and then we started getting wave after wave of dual land. Over the past, I think 5 years, we've gotten 3 full cycles of common dual lands, and basically they just pushed almost all the other lands out. I didn't have a reason for running, a filter land. I didn't have a reason to run cycling lands. We just had straight up mana fixing for all the colors and all the color pairs. Um, Ultimately, I think cycling lands are, they feel good generically in draft, but I don't think they're specifically good. What I mean by that is they're just okay, but nobody is really excited to draft with them, and they are kind of difficult to kind of work a theme around. There aren't really payoffs for much cycling in common, and that would shift a lot of the other cards and other colors outside of the lands. And if we had them, I think we'd either be replacing some of the mana fixing, which might be a net negative, or we'd be expanding the cube just to add more lands, and there's already quite a few lands in the cube. There's like 34, 35 lands counting the non-dual land cycles. So that's kind of the long-winded way of the history of the cycling lands in the cube, why they're not there now, and kind of why I'm a little lukewarm to maybe adding them back in. They're good cards, they're fine, and I don't think they hurt a cube, but I don't think they necessarily help a cube either. Especially, one where we already have so many other lands that, that help support people doing 2 colors or splashing a 3rd color. Okay. Yeah, thanks for asking the question. This is my last suggestion. iKite. This seems relevant to the conversation. Let's see. Coke Drake. Wow. As long as you've drawn 2 or more cards this turn. So I like iKite. I think iKite is definitely an exciting kind of card to draft around, right? So in the Modern Horizons limited environment, they've made a bunch of ways to draw multiple cards in blue, and payoffs in like blue-red. It's kind of like blue-red's thing, like draw cards, get value. And it's definitely like a tempo play, right? Like turn 2, play iKite. Turn 3, find a way to draw 2 cards, hit for 3 in the air, and play something else or play a 1 mana removal spell. Feels like a nice sweet spot. For our cube, there just aren't that many ways to draw multiple cards in a turn. So yes, the turns that you get to set it up, it feels really good, but I think oftentimes you'll end up with a 1/2 flyer that you can't get a lot out of. Cycling lands could make it better, but still, cycling costs mana, and that's the thing is if you cycle a card, you're paying either a fair, you're at best paying a fair rate to get a different card. None of those cycling lands. Maybe that's what I want. That's why I want common lands. They enter the battlefield tapped, and they cycle. But when you cycle them, you get an effect. Make them a spell that cantrips, and I think I get much more on board with those lands, because then I'm not adding lands to the cube. I'm actually adding secret encounterable spells. I think iKite would be really hard to consistently draw 2 cards in a turn. A lot of there's not as much card draw as you would think there is in blue. There is some, and there's a good amount, but it is kind of hard to make iKite consistent, and I think that's why I didn't look at it. Yeah, erratic. I want like 5. I want like another version of Erratic Visionary, but like a different name. So if someone's cube had more draw than the standard list, it'd make more sense. Yeah, if you're running a cube where you have a bunch of cantrips or a ton more cycling, it's kind of like the Delver of Secrets kind of thing, right? Like if you want Delver of Secrets to be good in your blue cube, you need a ton of spells to make it consistent. To make iKite consistent, you need a ton of cantrips where you're getting something in addition to its effect. And Cross and Tusker is, I think, an excellent example. Yeah, Cross and Tusker lands. Crossing Tusker is an excellent example of the kind of card that makes eye blight, eye blight, eye kite, and they need like some name differentiation. Eye kite, great, right? I always want to cycle Crossing Tusker because I get to find a land, I get to draw a card, I get to find land before I draw a card, and by drawing that extra card, I now turn my eye kite on. And that's the kind of sequencing where if you shape your cube into that cantripy, spell effect direction, the cards that care about casting, drawing 2 cards in a turn or casting, a second spell. Casting, cycling isn't casting, so it doesn't like help Thunderdrake, but that type of swap makes a lot of sense. And I think Fizzle makes a good point. Like if you're looking for something to swap Carnivorous Death Parrot for, Eye Kite is pretty close to Carnivorous Death Parrot. It's definitely, I think, a card that you can, with a little bit of finagling, plays out in a very similar way. And it certainly helps give blue-white another 2-drop that isn't silver bordered. Yeah, same argument for Delver. It's just it's hard to make it consistent. All right, more Modern Horizons cards. We're coming up on hour 3. This set is so bonkers. It's so good. Bonus on trigger. So as soon as you remember you've drawn, it's bigger. Yeah. Yeah, it's just a static effect, as long as you've drawn more than, 2 cards a turn. Anything else for Modern Horizons? This has been a ton of fun. Just so many cards to think about. Okay, Decontest is typing. I don't know if he or she's found another card. Mimic. Yeah, I mean, there's so many cards. I'm sure there are more cards to talk about. Yes, we talked about Trumpeting Herd, dropping. Hey, thanks for hanging out, Decontest. I really appreciate it. Enjoy. Thanks for being here from. If it's 4 a.m. for you, you must be somewhere in the EU. So thank you. Really appreciate the late night hangout. Trumpeting Herd, yes. Pima Outrider is I think an obvious card that can be replaced by Trumpeting Herd. 6 power for 6 power, 6 toughness, 4 mana. I think is a deal we'll all handily take. Even if we gotta wait a turn for that second 3/3. Omni's typing. I'll save the Cycling Lands crew mana base pitch for a later date. Yeah, maybe I can blame you, Omni. We'll do a special out of set update, and then we'll take out all of the current dual lands and add in all the cycling lands and all the Karus. Just cut 10 cards, totally upend the mana base. I love it. What do you got, Running Monkeys? I feel like I should have like a button and I can make the Jeopardy theme song. But finally got a Spore Frog for Commander. All out of cube stuff though. Yeah, Spore Frog is great when you have a lot of ways to abuse getting a creature back to fog with. Like it is cute, but there's no reason to have a fog in the cube. Like especially an onboard fog that players can see. Like it's not going to do what you want it to do. But I do love the adorable, cute Spore Frog. It is a lot of fun to make combat miserable when you're in control of it. Goblin War Party is another comment I'm excited about. No, we actually haven't talked about Goblin War Party. I talked about it in the Quick Hits article, and 4 mana to make three 1/1s is similar rate to a green creature that we don't run in the cube. Let me go to the Quick Hits article. Let me find that. Yeah, so Eyeless Watcher. Like, Eyeless Watcher makes Scion tokens that can help you ramp. And I remember playing around with this card, and it was just okay. It was never very good. It never felt like it really hit a sweet spot. And Goblin War Party's, create 3 goblins mode for its base is just a worse version of Eyeless Watcher. Arguably, it plays very different being in a different color. Not going to take away from that. Yeah, you can blink Eyeless Watcher. Yeah, like you can do more things with Watcher than you can do War Party. At least in the blink regard. 4 mana sorcery to just pump creatures and give them haste is kind of moot. Like if you have 6 mana, you probably just want to wait until you have 7 mana to entwine Goblin War Party. Like that's like the best mode, right? Like I'm gonna put 6 power down and I'm gonna attack you with it this turn, and it's spread over multiple creatures, so I'm probably getting through. That's still a lot. 7 mana is a ton for an aggressive red deck. Like you're just not hitting that. And 4 mana to pump to give everything +1/+1 is a really mediocre effect. That's just not. It's not enough power pumping. So like the flexibility of Goblin War Party is generally, when you have like a modal card, that's generally an advantage of it, but it's just not strong enough on its own. And like Heroic Reinforcements is I think it's an uncommon, right? Yeah, it's an uncommon where for the same amount of mana you get both effects at the same time. We had Pursued Glory in for a while, but 4 mana was a lot to put into pumping creatures, and that's the big difference. Was Pursued Glory was just always kind of meh. There's like 4 or 5 effects at 3 mana in red that are just Trumpet Blast, and that's great. When you compare Pursue Glory to Warflare, Warflare is pumping toughness as well, and it untaps them, which means whatever doesn't get through helps you fight the crackback. It just helps you win a race, and it's a much stronger card. It's also multicolored, which is why it's in the cube. Like it helps give that color some identity. I think Heroic Reinforcements is a card I would consider playing at common, but ultimately, at its base value, either mode for Goblin War Party is just okay, and 7 mana together is basically unachievable. Like you're just not going to really count on that being an outcome when you pick up that card. I don't know if anybody feels otherwise, but that was kind of my final assessment for it, which is why I didn't spend any time talking about it. It was just the base evaluation just doesn't hit. It doesn't excite me any way I evaluate it. Some people are typing. Yeah, 1 mana too much for all 3 modes. I think it'd be a little bit different if this was 3 mana instead of 4. Like don't change the entwine. Just change Goblin War Party and shave it down to 3 mana. I think it makes a much bigger difference, because now I'm comparing it straight up to the downshifted card from Concertar Kier that makes 3 mana. Now I'm comparing +1/+1 in haste to +2/+0. Yeah, strictly better Hordeling Outburst. Yeah, like it just totally changed the calculus, but it's just 1 mana, just too many. And if it was 3 mana, like I would either consider swapping it for Hordeling Outburst or changing out another 3-drop, to make it, to get that effect going in, because making 3 creatures for 3 mana is, I think, the right rate. Like it's 1 mana for 1 creature, 2 mana for 2 creatures, 3 mana for 3 creatures, and I'm just really, I'm not. I guess I shouldn't be confused why this is 3 mana or 4 mana, but I'm wondering if it started as 3 mana and it got bumped up because it was just a little too strong and flexible for 3 mana. Anything else? Again, this set is so good. Going once. Going twice. One person's typing. I'm gonna drag it out while they type. I don't want to take away any opportunity. Let the man sleep, you animals. It's only 11 o'clock here. It's not bad. Good night, Fizzle. Thanks for hanging out. Yeah, anytime. Glad you can ask so many questions. It definitely appreciate thinking about this and getting ideas out there so I can see what's weak and what's strong. There's no interest in any sort of snow sub-theme, right? So I don't have an interest in the snow sub-theme. I really like, snow is very parasitic. Like, you're either all in on snow or you're not in snow at all. And so the way they execute snow in both Cold Snap and Modern Horizons, which are the only two sets that we really have decent snow cards to pull from, is that they made snow creatures, creatures that would have the permanent type, super type snow, and you had to draft the snow lands as you went. For Cube, it's not really feasible to throw a bunch of snow lands in unless you're like going really all in for for that theme. So the natural conclusion would be to use snow basics instead. I think if you like the snow basics, or like if you're like, I really like the full art snow basic lands, I think they're beautiful. I think it's totally fine to look at some of the key snow cards and add them in, like Arkham's Astrolab, Skred. There's a bunch of great stuff that you can throw in that I think is obvious kind of adds, but fundamentally it's just kind of like a bonus because you've chosen to use snow basics instead of regular basics for the cube. And I think that's the main difference, is that unless you're building like an Ice Age themed cube where you have a bunch of ice stuff, snow stuff, and you weave in the stuff from Modern Horizons that's snow as well, outside of that context, I don't see, snow being that much other than like you get a rampant growth, you get a couple interesting creatures, but they all just rely on you switching all of your basics to snow, and I'm not willing to do that. I just don't see the bonus for it. Selfie. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, selfie preservation. I use the basics I use, which are the unhinged basics, because I like to run selfie preservation as like my flavor of other rampant growth. If you're running snow basics, you just get to swap into the north, and it's basically the same. So I don't have an interest in adding a snow theme just to add it, because it would mean leaning into snow basics. But if you swap it, I think there's no reason not to. There's just a ton of, there's a handful of really great snow cards at common that if you're running snow basics are awesome to add, and I would go ahead and do that if you're into snow, but we're not gonna, that's not where I'm headed. Good question though. Like, I learned using Ice Age cards and Mirage cards. Like, snow is near and dear to my heart, so I appreciate the question. It's definitely cool for the people that go all in on making that a workable thing. Probably mention that to those who want to avoid silverware cards because they've been reprinted. Talking about noting that the snow basics have been reprinted, which means you can go into the north. I think that's actually a great article idea. I could talk about a fork in the cube where what if you use snow basics instead? What does that mean? And I can note like into the north and Chiller Pillar, which would be a card I would definitely run in a snow cube. I think that's a good topic. As kind of like a designer choice. 30 to 40 should cover it. Yeah. I think 40 to 45 is probably a little bit closer, because sometimes you end up with like the 3 red drafters at the table, and every single red card gets played, and you need every single mountain. But definitely 35 to 40 works for the most part. Number of basics. Running Monkeys is still typing. I have 40. Yeah. I went up to 45 recently too, and it's been very, very close more times than I can. And I broke it one time where 4 people were playing red, and literally every mountain was just getting used. One player had to use a different basic instead of mountains, which was not ideal. But yeah, so I think that's Modern Horizons driven into the floor with a marathon 3-hour discussion. I don't have confidence in exactly what the update looks like, so that's something I'll be working on, and I'll probably share it before I post it live in a Patron chat just to get some more feedback, because it's such a complex and difficult set to evaluate. So many moving pieces, so many good cards, and so I'm really excited that Wizards gave us this gift, and I'm really scared about how to make the most of it. It's daunting and really cool all at once. People are typing. While you're typing up, or if you have any last call stuff that you want to add, I do want to note that the prices for some of the, if you're a foil rewards patron, some of the prices for this set are all over the place, and some of the availability is really tough. So the price is coming down, but unlike a standard set, right, for the most part, or even some of the older master sets, I could reasonably have stores where they would have 20 copies in stock on TCG Player, or 20 copies in stock at some of the big box standalone stores that I shop. I've been tracking it, and I'm hoping it gets a little bit better as more product gets into the mix and more stores add more inventory over the coming weeks to online marketplaces. But I'm a little concerned I'm going to have some trouble getting all the rewards together. So I don't want it to be delayed, but it may take me a little bit longer than normal to get all the rewards together. So just trying to give you a heads up that the set's weird on multiple dimensions, that the fulfillment side's definitely going to be a little bit tougher than I anticipated. But we'll work through it. I got some time to do that. And I'm definitely not ready to order anything tonight anyway. So it's definitely daunting from that side, but just in the interest of transparency, thanks for being patient and understanding as I try to make all this work. So yeah, only X more days until the M20 update. Yeah, like it's definitely moving quick this summer. Just so many releases back to back. Previews start Monday, by the way. If you weren't sure, Modern Horizons releases now. Monday, the new core set kicks off officially, like scheduled weeks of previews. So yeah, get ready for more commons being shoved into Pauper Cube chat. It's way too early. It feels very rushed. I agree. Yeah, Chandra Acolyte of Flame. Yeah. They it's the Chandra Shet set. But anyway, that's all I got tonight. Thanks for hanging out. I appreciate all the feedback and all the awesome ideas and questions. I think the cube's going in a great way, and it's a big part of it is how much all of you care about it too. And I really appreciate that as somebody trying to make an awesome experience for everybody. So thank you. And with that, have a good night.